As we head into season 5, I know you probably can't give too much away, but what can you tease and say about the final season?
We really blow the doors off it. It's so fun to be able to end a show on your own terms and to have it reach the highest possible level of conflict and drama.
This didn't age well. And my sweet Eric, how I have missed you. The Boys Season 5 is the worst thing to happen to television since I guess The Boys Season 4. Now it seems that there's been a great deal of denial going on in the fan base. As we came closer and closer to the finale, people were beginning to lose hope as it became clear that this season was not going to end in anything but utter failure.
Take care of your mom, Robin.
We tried to warn you, we tried to speak up, but here we are, all of us arriving at the same conclusion. Sure, some of us got here sooner than others, but who's counting? But now the veil has been pulled back to reveal the malformed fecal matter that this show has become. So let's have an honest conversation, shall we? Let's get into all the fun reasons why The Boys Season 5, and let's be fair, why most of the show is really, really bad. Chapter 1. Maintaining the Status Quo. To be able to understand why Season 5 of The Boys is so bad, we have to talk about where Season 4 left the story, and how this cliffhanger was pretty much retconned immediately. So in the Season 4 finale, we see that Butcher has finally gone full Tyler Durden and has accepted his darker persona. He kills Newman, destroying her deal with the boys, which ultimately screws them all over. As without her, Homelander is able to take over the US government, and Frenchie, Kimiko, MM, and Hughie are arrested. And it seems as though his extremist path has led him somewhere far darker than anyone else is willing to go. Hence Butcher going off alone, quite literally on a dark road. So you would think that this would break their relationship with Butcher, right? That the boys would be resentful towards him because he essentially messed everything up so he could go commit global genocide. But nope, turns out Butcher can just show up and nobody seems to really blame him for anything. I mean, sure, Huey's got a few bitchy comments to make occasionally, but that's really it. Essentially, Butcher breaks them out of prison and they all go back to working together like none of it ever happened. There's no real moment of recognition or forgiveness, or a scene where Butcher comes to terms with what he had done by killing Newman. And this isn't the first time the show has done this. We see in the Season 1 finale that Butcher straight up leaves the boys to die so he can go get revenge on Homelander. But then in Season 2, he just comes back and they all welcome him with open arms. The same thing happens again in Season 3, where Butcher has seemingly crossed the line by teaming up with Soldier Boy. But then the boys forgive him again, and the team is back together in Season 4. So Kripke has proven time and again that he likes to set up the idea of Butcher going too far, only to go back on it. So in the end, these relationships never really change. And since we're talking about consequences, let's talk about the fact that this huge cliffhanger arrest sequence means absolutely nothing in hindsight. Since Homelander knows who the boys are and how much of a threat they pose to him personally, you would think that he would have them killed. After all, what purpose does keeping them alive really serve? We are told that Homelander is doing this so he could use them as bait in order to draw out Butcher and Starlight, but you didn't need all of them in order to do that. Homelander knows that Hughie is really important to both these characters, so if you need a hostage, then he would be good enough by himself. Then you could use Hughie as bait if you really wanted to, as on his own, he's not much of a threat.
You always have to be the strong one. You always have to be so much stronger than me.
Apparently, Vought got tired of Kimiko killing all of their guards, so they deported her to the Philippines. Which makes no sense on so many levels. First of all, if she was really that much of a problem, then again, just kill her. The show acts like Vought found this impossible, but there are certainly ways to kill Kimiko, or at least subdue her in a semi-permanent way. For example, Homelander could fly her into space and leave her there, or drop her body to the bottom of the ocean. They could bury her in concrete, or just shoot her in the head and keep doing it every time she heals and regains consciousness. Or keep her sedated the same way they do with Soldier Boy. Hell, we see that they have a superhero prison in Gen V, just throw her in there. Or what about these radiation cells? Sister Sage makes it clear that the radiation could kill her if done enough times. Surely a scientist at Vought would have come up with that idea as well. But instead of doing these easy and logical ideas, Vought instead deports the super terrorist / super spy / international super assassin to a place they have no surveillance or control over. That's a great idea. I'm sure that won't come back to bite you in the ass later. And why are Frenchie, MM, and Hughie sent to an open-air prison camp? which is a lot less secure than an actual prison or even the cells beneath Vought Tower. We know that Homelander wants Starlight to fly in and try to rescue them when he leaks their execution. But what if she had done that at any other point when he wasn't expecting it? Then all of his leverage would be gone and the whole point of keeping them alive would be wasted. It would have made much more sense had all of them been kept in a highly secure prison that Starlight couldn't have flown into at any moment. As it is though, the only reason Starlight doesn't save them before this is because she doesn't want to. Which is also retarded, but we'll get to that later. So of course the boys get freed in the first episode and everything goes back to normal. Butcher is back in charge and everyone's roped into a crazy mission where they try to find a way to kill Homelander. Wow, it's like the entire season 4 finale was a really bad fake out that gets swept under the rug immediately. Kind of reminds me of another famous show that set up consequences in its 4th season only to have it all undone because it didn't fit into the traditional formula of the series.
Like, it's a whole new world, and our guys have a big job ahead of them, and so it's going to be really, like, epic.
It's a total fabrication. It never happened. It never happened. This one was invented by a writer. Not this time. It never happened. It's false. It never happened.
What this proves is that the writers have no balls, which makes a lot of sense considering who the showrunner is. Kripke was never prepared to take any real risks, and never wanted to take the boys in a new direction, which makes everything feel sterile, predictable, and boring. Chapter 2, Treading Water with No Stakes. Since we're on the topic of boring, might as well discuss how the plot goes absolutely nowhere for half this season. So in episode 3, the boys discover that their virus doesn't work on the soups that have been injected with V1, making people like Soldier Boy immune. Therefore, Homelander wants to get his hands on the V1 so he can also become immune to the virus. The boys of course want to get to it first so they can kill him and also stop him from becoming immortal. The show then enters this weird stalemate where the boys can't get the virus in front of Homelander for constantly changing reasons. And simultaneously, neither party is able to find the V1. The boys go to Stan Edgar, who tells them it's at Fort Harmony. They spend episode 4 looking for the V1, but don't end up finding it. Instead, they just get a clue that this guy Bombsight has it. And then in episode 5, Homelander and Soldier Boy go on another goose chase to find the V1, where they also figure out that Bombsight has it. So all they accomplish is discovering information the audience already knew. All the while the boys just sit and chill in their hideout. So in 3 episodes, nothing is achieved. Instead, we are forced to sit back and watch these characters go through repetitive conversations and stale melodrama while the plot chases its own tail. Just how many times do we need to see Hughie and Butcher argue over using the virus?
This thing kills just Homelander? Or every soup?
Dunno, but we'll have a laugh finding out, won't we? We draw him out and hit him today.
Okay, how are you gonna get it in front of them?
And there are a lot of other soups that don't deserve to die either.
You think the world needs more immortal c***s, do you?
We need it to save Annie and Kimiko.
Well, if you want to kill yourself, knock yourself out, but why do you have to decide for the rest of us?
Oh, 'cause I'm fucking right. If we do find that B1, you can have some.
I told you, Hughie. As soon as the German's ready, we go, and according to Frenchie, it's ready.
Does anyone really consider this character development? Was this script written by fucking Grok? Has nobody thought of new conversations for these characters to have? Yes, we get it. Butcher wants to kill all the soups, and Hughie wants to save him, Kimiko, and Annie. You do not need to go over this more than 3 times. Establish the moral quandary for these characters and have it come up again when they are faced with the decision. Maybe have a conversation in between to help build tension. But these two go on and on about it, having the same argument almost every episode, and it goes nowhere. Which makes this debate feel dull and pointless because it lacks that narrative punch. This show has become somewhat infamous for this problem of treading water, especially when it comes to character growth.
So why do you keep running headfirst into the same brick wall?
Homelander, for example, couldn't go full Gollum into the end of the story. So the writers kept having to find new ways to make him seem one step closer to the edge without actually having him lose his mind. But this could at least be explained as having to fill in their 5-season contract. You can't have Homelander destroy the world before the end of the show. But now in the final season, this is still going on. Like any day now, Homelander's gonna fully crack and millions of people are gonna die and the world's gonna end. Yet it doesn't happen because why exactly? The writers even set a new finish line for themselves by building up the idea that once Homelander gets the V1, that everybody's gonna be in big trouble. But even after Homelander succeeds, he doesn't act any differently.
Homelander thinks he's a fucking god. Once he becomes immortal, he's gonna start killing like one, and we are talking millions of people. Run.
2 hours later.
The fuck is all this? Hey.
The writers would like us to believe that the stakes have somehow been raised in season 5, but the boys are no worse off than before. They still operate in secret, they still use hideouts, and they are still all together against the same odds they are in every season. Would it not have been more interesting to actually see the boys at a greater point of desperation here? Instead of teasing us with the idea of Homelander destroying the world and killing millions of people, actually have him do it. Make him the monster the show says he will become. This would immediately raise the stakes and create real consequences for the world and characters. And instead of having the boys operating with seemingly no issues, have Vought be constantly on their tail, hide their identities, and have the 7 be competent enough to actually catch them. Just exert a constant pressure on the group, which would in turn put them in a more difficult position, upping the stakes, which would help to move the plot forward. The show Narcos was really good at setting up this intense pace. In Season 2, Pablo was always on the move as various factions either tried to kill or arrest him. And because of this, the show feels more engaging and anxiety-inducing as he's always one slip up away from getting caught. The boys would have benefited heavily from this kind of narrative pressure. But instead, the writers let the boys hang out for most of the season with seemingly no worry about being found. Homelander sends Soldier Boy after them in episode 2, but then doesn't try to do it again despite him being immune to the virus. It's not until episode 7 that Homelander even finds their hideout, but even then he's only there to find Sister Sage. So the villains completely disregard the boys for most of season 5 and don't even really attempt to stop them, which allows the protagonist to be on the offensive, trying to scheme and pursue Homelander without him retaliating. But that brings us back around to the point, right? We have to circle the same drain over and over again in every season of this show. Nothing changes and everything stays the same. Everything is only done to maintain the status quo and tread water as long as possible. It's just rinse and repeat narrative diarrhea. Chapter 3, The Tale of Starlight, the super sneaky super spy. So this season kicks off with Starlight infiltrating Vought Tower to interrupt one of Homelander's speeches with the Flight 37 video. Now this opening scene is so fucking stupid, it can give you a headache if you start to think about it for even a second. But I endured this, so you have to as well. So as we have already established, Homelander has turned the US into an Orwellian surveillance state. The entire country is on lockdown. People are being sent to prison camps, neighbors are ratting each other out to the government, and everyone is being watched. Despite this supposed nightmare scenario, Starlight, the most wanted person in America, is somehow able to infiltrate Homelander's home base with no problem. All she does is throw on a wig and nobody recognizes her? Not to mention the fact that Vought has facial recognition cameras and an entire department dedicated to finding people. You would think that Vought Tower would be the most well-guarded place in the country at this point, especially after the events of Season 3. So it should be impossible for Starlight specifically to break into it. The most annoying part of this whole thing is that Starlight has other heroes she can call on who could have easily accomplished this mission on their own, ones who are far less recognizable and have powers much more fitting to this task.
Do it. You know you want to. Sam, go to sleep.
Don't help.
Eat your own fucking hands, you monster. Let's do a live stream. Feel nothing.
But hey, we're only going to acknowledge Marie and her friends sometimes, but never use them when they would actually come in handy because reasons. Seriously, Kate alone could have done this job with no problem. Her power is quite literally to control people's thoughts and actions with the touch of her hand. She could have found any Vought employee and just commanded them to play the video during Homelander's speech. Kate is such an unbelievably powerful character, and she's completely underutilized by everyone in the show. But anyway, the Gen V squad isn't here, so it's just Starlight and these two red shirts. While the video is being uploaded, Black Noir tries to stop them. We see that Starlight tries to use her powers, but is unable to because it interferes with the computers in the room. The two then get into a very choppy and poorly edited scuffle. And despite being at a serious disadvantage, Starlight still manages to win the fight? Isn't Noir supposed to be the best hand-to-hand combatant in the 7? And I know this guy isn't the original Noir, but he's still a skilled fighter who's supposed to be a legitimate replacement. His whole bit this season is that he's method acting, so one could assume that this would involve becoming a master of martial arts. My point being that Starlight should be a very easy opponent here. She is not as strong as Noir, and without her main abilities, she is severely weakened. It should also be noted that she was never really shown to be trained at combat. From what we know about Starlight's backstory, she is essentially just a pageant girl. And sure, you could say that she may have had some training in this year between seasons, but this is never actually referenced, so there's no real reason to believe that this is the case. It should also be noted in Season 2, Annie gets her ass handed to her by Noir, and their fight is far more destructive. As it should be, considering that these are two superhumans. It's pretty amazing that this brawl doesn't create more of a scene, which would cause Vought soldiers to come to Noir's aid. In reality, how difficult would it have been for Noir to stop this upload? All he has to do is throw his sword at this computer or land a punch on this guy, and the whole thing would be over. But anyway, Annie somehow wins the fight and the upload is completed. Too bad this video has pretty much no effect on the public and doesn't seem to have much impact on the narrative long term, despite all the buildup it had to destroying Homelander's persona. But if we have established anything, it's that this show likes to parade around the idea of consequences without actually committing to them. Afterwards, Starlight somehow finds a way to escape Vought Tower, which is never actually shown or explained because, frankly, it's ridiculous. If you're willing to accept that she was able to get into Vought Tower unnoticed, then what the fuck is the excuse to how she got out? Everybody would be on high alert and the whole building would be on lockdown. Furthermore, the military would also be on their way since Starlight is a wanted super terrorist. To top it all off, the Seven are also here, including Homelander. You know, the guy who can hear a pin drop from a mile away, who also has super smell and can see through walls. Wouldn't he be on her in like a second? Hell, he could just look through the building and laser her. Then zap, she's fucking dead. But instead, Homelander just fucking stands there and contemplates murdering everyone around him instead of going after the one woman who has publicly humiliated him. You know, the one thing this guy can't handle? But hey, I guess Homelander, the guards, the surveillance teams, the Seven, and the US Army just let Starlight go after this. Hey, if we do a cutaway, then it doesn't really matter. Just don't stop to think about it and everything makes sense. And perhaps the remaining portion of your audience doesn't stop to think about the stories they consume, which is the only way to rationalize how this show has an audience to begin with. But hey, that's fine. Sometimes it's good to flick on a show, kick up your feet, and forget about the real world for a second. But let's not pretend this excuses this piss poor writing here. We can all be enjoying better, more sophisticated, and well thought out television. We don't need to settle for slop when steak is available.
What are sloppy steaks?
Chapter 4. Maybe I'm just a prude. So The Boys has become known for pushing the envelope when it comes to explicit humor. Every time the cast members or Kripke himself promotes the show, they will say things like, "This season's gonna be crazier than anything we've done before," or, "We really took things to a new level this time." At this point, it feels like this is the only thing that they have to sell people on. Tune in to see the deep fucking octopus or witness Hughie sit on a cake. But the show used to offer a lot more than that. Yes, of course, Season 1 had plenty of graphic, in-your-face content, but it was vital to what was happening in the plot. It was a way to unveil the truth to Hughie, as well as the audience, as to what was going on behind closed doors. That the soups and their public images were just facades. And it was also a way to demonstrate just how dangerous soups can be to regular people. But now the writers will just throw in some dick jokes and some gore anywhere they can fit it. But if you're showing superheroes get their rocks off and having people's heads explode every 5 seconds, it becomes normal, thus losing its element of surprise. So the only thing the writers can do from there is try to increase the weirdness level every season, always trying to one-up itself like there's actually anyone out here cheering this on. Even casual dialogue is riddled with dick analogies. It would have been so easy to fix this if they had given one character the gimmick of being overtly sexual, while other characters play the straight man. That way the dialogue doesn't become oversaturated, and it would also help to diversify the perspectives within the group itself. Given Starlight's backstory, it would have made sense if she was a bit more shy or disgusted when it came to explicit references. And by having her be a bit Puritan, she would have contrasted with other characters such as Frenchie, giving more opportunities for group debates or arguments. The show instead decides to give everyone the same kind of humor like they're all 17-year-old Reddit users. A good example of this is Soldier Boy. If he was one of the few characters who was obsessed with making explicit references, then Hughie's line here would make more sense.
All your jokes are about dudes blowing dudes. You're kind of obsessed.
But this quip is kind of stupid because everybody talks this way.
You're right. Smells like an Abercrombie got by a 7-Eleven while Arby's off in the corner. Underneath that chest full of octocooks.
Suck my fat.
Wholesome moments between characters also need to be undercut with this kind of humor.
A rabbit, but it's got way too many feet.
Really? See a frog eating a dick.
And I'm fine with these kinds of jokes when they're earned, but The Boys turns edgelord comedy into pure cringe because you can tell they're just trying so desperately to get a, oh my god, they said that? The Boys isn't Eastbound and Down or South Park. It's not just a comedy, and by choosing to constantly throw this kind of absurd humor in our faces, it ends up undermining the tone and impact of the narrative. Chapter 5, Annie January, Freedom Fighter. Alright, let's get into this character and how this bimbo is actually portrayed in the show. Over the course of the story, Annie's gone from being a bright-eyed and starstruck pageant girl to a hardened resistance fighter who's willing to make the difficult choices in order to defeat Homelander. Now on paper, this looks like a pretty solid arc. But once you stop to think about things, you realize she actually does very little. Starlight's main plotline is her conflict with Homelander as he becomes more powerful and starts to take over Vought as well as America. Annie uses her celebrity to start a counterculture movement called the Starlighters. However, this whole subplot is very underdeveloped. For example, by season 4, it seems like the Starlighters have become their own political entity. But despite being the face of the organization, Annie never really utilizes these people who look to her for leadership. Sure, they do a protest and she works at the Starlight house for a bit, but the show quickly sidelines all this as she becomes a regular member of the Boys. Despite this, Gen V Season 2 felt like the setup for Starlight's resistance group, as we see Starlight recruit Marie and we are shown what life is like for her on the run. By the end of the season, most of the characters have joined the fight against Vought. Gen V and the Boys made it clear that war was on the horizon, and all of this buildup was preparing the audience for this outcome. But I guess the war just happens off screen because we never actually see it play out. Even A-Train has joined and left the Starlighters off screen. The Gen V characters are hardly present, yet they are consistently name-dropped throughout Season 5. Always supposedly off in another location doing something else for the fight, yet we never actually hear what this is, or how it could possibly be more important than taking down Homelander.
I take it Marie Moreau is running late?
Marie's not coming, but I know about the meeting you had a while back.
Annie also explains that during this year on the run, she's had to make hard decisions as the resistance leader and has gotten people killed. But I don't think I need to tell you that showing is always better than telling. Yet that's all we get here. We are told many times that Annie has suffered losses fighting Vought, but it all rings hollow because we have no idea what or who she's really talking about. The only people we see get killed are these two guys. But even after their death, this is Annie's reaction to it.
Where's everybody?
You see that? She kind of went like, like a, oh man. That's the look. That's the kind of look she's giving. Like, you know, a minor mistake, like a little whoopsie. And then A-Train doesn't even care. He's just like, oh well.
Well, I heard about the Pittsburgh raid last month.
God. You know, geez, that's terrible.
So we just have to assume that Annie's been getting a bunch of these randoms killed, but what does that matter to the audience? Do you care that Starlight's unnamed and unexplained friends died fighting in a conflict you didn't see? The only thing that really changes on a character level this season is that she wants to off herself with the virus. But besides that, Annie still acts like an empty suit who is vaguely upset about everything all the time. No different than before, really. And from a writing perspective, this is extremely frustrating as it makes the entire subplot feel pointless. It would have been so easy for the writers to integrate Starlight's resistance into the main story. They could have had Annie leading the Gen V characters in her own super team, which would have contrasted well with the Seven. Instead of using Butcher's contacts and locations, it could have been Annie who provided the Boys with resources and even a new hideout with resistance operators. They could have gone into detail about how Starlight's operation had gone nationwide, coming to understand what they do to fight against Vought. Is it a covert operation? Are they an armed rebellion? Do they use guerrilla tactics? Are they smuggling people out of the country? It would have been great to get the answers to any of these questions. But instead, the most information we get is this.
Well, I heard about the Pittsburgh raid last month. Go Marie Moreau. How's her team doing?
A raid in Pittsburgh. Great. And what are they raiding exactly? Are they stealing something? If so, what are they stealing? And who are they raiding? Is it Vought? The military? The police? I guess they'll have to go over it in Gen V Season 3. Oh. But of course, they couldn't have added these changes because that would have broken the old dynamic the writers are obsessed with. And because of this, Starlight is just shoehorned into an underling position where she doesn't have a lot to offer the story. In episode 4, she's given this whole subplot where she goes to visit her dad in hopes of reconnecting with him. But this ends up being such an unnecessary side quest because she doesn't grow from the experience. Sure, Annie supposedly learns the lesson of not pushing away the people she loves, but this isn't even something she holds on to, as Mother's Milk essentially has to give her the same speech a couple episodes later. It would have made more sense had she debated the morality of using the virus on soups and sacrificing herself to use it. Her father could have been the one to talk her out of doing this, walking her back from the edge a bit. This would then impact the main narrative as it would create conflict between her and Butcher. But as it is, there are simply no revelations about Annie as a character here. What is most likely the case is that the writers needed a reason for her not to be at Fort Harmony because she would have ended up killing most of the boys while under the influence of the spores. Or even worse, she would have had to talk to Hughie about how she victim blamed him for being assaulted by the shapeshifter.
Cannot overstate this enough. I thought it was you.
Yeah, and as long as you were getting laid, you didn't look too close.
Don't worry though, we're gonna get to that later. But while on the subject of Annie's morality, another thing the show keeps trying to tell us is that she's changed a lot in this last year on the run. Starlight is edgy now. A good example of this is when she agrees to save Frenchie from the internment camp before Hughie. The idea is that Starlight is willing to put the mission before herself and others. And while this is a point of tension, the show pretty much glosses over the fact that Annie left the boys to rot in prison for a whole year. Her reason for doing this is because she couldn't own up to Hughie about the apparently terrible shit she had to do while fighting Vought. And nobody talks about how fucking evil this is. Starlight is supposed to be in love with Hughie. This is the man she wants to marry and start a family with. Someone who has always been there for her and has been willing to sacrifice himself in order to keep her safe. Yet Starlight rewards this loyalty by not rescuing him, all because she didn't want to have an emotional discussion.
You were going to see me get sent to fucking prison!
See, this is a much more realistic response to your partner allowing you to be incarcerated. But Hughie, being a modern man, just accepts it and tries to make her feel better about her guilt. Hey man, why don't you take that collar off and let her have it? This woman ruined a year of your life. She put you at a huge risk of getting killed, all because she was too wrapped up in her own feelings. And she doesn't only do this to Hughie, but MM and Frenchie as well. None of them seem to hold a grudge against this psychopath either.
Wait, you've known where the guys are this whole time? That makes me feel angry and want to tit slap you, but then hug you.
That's it? Kimiko is in love with Frenchie. Losing him was so traumatizing for her, she regained the power of speech just to cry out in horror. So you think that Kimiko discovering that she could have already been reunited with him would garner a bit more of a negative reaction than this? This is a whole year of time they never got together, that they have been robbed of. And considering that Frenchie gets killed soon after, this missed time would be something Kimiko would constantly be mourning over.
Where's your fucking rage? Your self-respect!
And what about MM? He's a man who loves his family. And because he was taken away from them, this made him super depressed and nihilistic. But haha, it's all good. We're just gonna gloss over this whole thing because we don't like to deal with consequences in this show, especially when it comes to the women. Annie also tries to come up with a defense that they are somehow more safe in prison because they won't be on the run like she is. And while this is a lie, it still underlines just how little she thinks about Hughie and his well-being. Because in the same episode, Homelander shows up and kills everyone in the bunkhouse. The only thing that prompts Annie to rescue the boys is that she discovers they're all going to be executed. Something she didn't know about until Butcher told her. So if Butcher had failed to learn about the leak himself, then Hughie, Frenchie, and MM would have all been executed. And this isn't even acknowledging that Homelander could have been torturing these guys the entire time for all Starlight knew. And simply doing a flyby, as she describes it, wouldn't help her distinguish how much peril Hughie is in. So his survival hinges on the fact that Homelander just chooses not to kill him. And Starlight is willing to take those betting odds for some reason, despite her knowing how erratic and bloodthirsty he is. And what makes this worse is that the writers are completely oblivious to what they are actually doing here. But when Kripke isn't crushing the moral fiber of Starlight's character into gravel, he pretty much sidelines her for the rest of the show. On her own, she does nothing to drive the story forward. There are no major actions she takes that alters the course of the plot, and in fact, you can best describe her character by what she fails to do. She releases the Flight 37 video, which does nothing to Homelander's public persona. Her resistant movement doesn't accomplish anything, she fails to convince A-Train to help her free the boys, leaving that job up to his brother. She gets caught by O-Father when setting up this virus in the church. She never utilizes the Gen V squad, even though they would have been extremely useful. And even in the finale, she does nothing to help with the fight with Homelander. Instead, Starlight ends up facing off against the Deep, who had already been disowned by Homelander, and still she fails to convince him to join her side. Seriously, I have no idea why she wouldn't just fly off and leave him here so she could go back and help at the White House. Obviously, Homelander is the real threat, and a fight between them would have been much more fulfilling for her character. Starlight had already gotten her revenge on the Deep, first by destroying his public persona, and then by defeating him in Season 4. Homelander, on the other hand, has been her personal and political enemy for most of the show, one she has never been able to directly face off against, either because she was on her own or was dealing with something else. Yet she plays no part in his downfall, and in fact doesn't even interact with him this entire season. So glad we're getting all these relationships paid off in the finale. In the end, Starlight decides to settle down and become a local crime stopper with Hughie, leaving her celebrity behind. And of course, she does all of this while pregnant, because the writers wanted to inject one last bit of cringe into the show before signing off. What is Hollywood's recent obsession with showing girl power by putting pregnant women on the front lines of battles? From what we've established about Starlight's character, we have to assume she's either trying to kill this baby or simply doesn't care about her well-being. And please, don't give me the argument that she's a superhero and therefore the infant is somehow safe inside of her. Even if the child has powers of its own, there is no way going Mach 10 inside the steel cage of a womb is healthy for her. That baby is turning into soup right in front of Hughie's eyes and he's smiling about it. My point being that any sane person would not put a pregnant woman in harm's way, superhero or not. And all of this leaves me wondering, are we actually supposed to like Starlight at this point? I mean, what does she actually bring to the table here? She is someone who manipulates and gaslights their partner after being assaulted and somehow manages to make the whole thing about herself. She is set up to be a revolutionary leader in a war that plays out off-screen. She doesn't care about the lives of her friends, the man she supposedly loves, herself, or anyone else who follows her. She is prone to abandoning her teammates in their time of need. She's rude, arrogant, and nonsensical. She constantly needs to be reassured and emotionally cared for, despite reciprocating none of this in return. She vapes a lot, and it becomes evident that she's nothing but a selfish asshole who just so happens to be on the side of the good guys. Nothing ever comes before what she wants to do, not even the safety and well-being of her own child. Chapter 6. The Man Who Likes to Watch. Of course, we couldn't discuss the boys properly if we didn't talk about, well, who was once the main character of the show, Hugh Campbell. It would be easy and pretty obvious to say that Hughie is disappointing. You could use that word to describe almost every character on this show, but with him, it hits a little differently. Because Hughie was set up to have a lot of potential growth, all of which was wasted at every given opportunity. When we meet Hughie, he's a pretty regular guy. He works at a video store, lives with his dad, and is clearly not living up to his potential because he's a bit of a pushover.
I really need to talk to you about
Later,
something.
kid.
Okay.
What makes Hughie interesting is that he's supposed to be a surrogate for most comic book nerds. The kind of lovable dork archetype that fits perfectly into this story, while also being someone the audience can relate to. To top it all off, he's a fish out of water. So as he learns more about the seedy underbelly of the superhero world, so do we as viewers. This is a very good and solid foundation for a main character. He's likable, relatable, funny, and he has clear flaws that he'll need to overcome in order to survive in this world. And over the course of the first season, he's taken on a journey that does exactly that. The show starts off with Hughie witnessing the murder of his girlfriend by a superhero he believed that was supposed to protect the innocent. He is then recruited by Butcher to help get revenge on the people responsible. While reluctant at first, Hughie begins to gain confidence as he works with the boys to take down the Seven, even going so far as to kill Translucent. As the story continues, however, he struggles with his morality as the mission becomes more questionable. This is mostly due to his new romance with Annie, a superhero who actually wants to do good and to help people. By the end of the season, Starlight discovers Hughie's misdeeds. Simultaneously, Frenchie, MM, and Kimiko are arrested, leaving only Hughie and Butcher left to try and take down Homelander. Hughie refuses to help Butcher because he sees where the path of revenge will lead him. He'll end up becoming just like Billy, alone, angry, and corrupt. In the beginning, Hughie wanted revenge for Robin's murder. He saw an opportunity to get back at the people who had wronged him. But due to his friendships and to his new love for Starlight, Hughie sees that there's more to hang on to than revenge. He can be a real hero by putting good into the world instead of just destroying evil. And by the end, he even tries to save A-Train, despite the fact it was him who caused all of Hughie's pain in the first place. Not only does Hughie discover his moral center, but he also shows the ability to become a real leader as he comes up with a plan to save the boys on his own, something Butcher refused to do. So in Season 1, Hughie goes from being a cowardly nerd seeking revenge to a courageous leader who will do the right thing. And you would think that the progression of this character is pretty clear. His relationships have been more or less defined. He's worked out what he will and won't do, and has demonstrated his value to the people around him. So in The Boys Season 2, Hughie is reduced to being a depressed spaz who is guilt-tripped by Annie. After taking charge and saving MM, Frenchie, and Kimiko, they all immediately lose confidence in him and allow Butcher to become their leader again. Hughie is underappreciated by the boys and ultimately just becomes Butcher's lapdog again. His personal plotline mostly relies on Starlight and how she feels about him. Their relationship status actually becomes a subplot in every season of the show. What Hughie does and how he feels usually relies on Annie and what she thinks of him, which ends up stripping away a lot of his agency as a character.
Oh god, no, I'm still gonna cling on to you. I'm not fucking crazy.
In Season 3, Hughie seems to be in a more confident position as he's trying to take down Soups in a legal and legitimate way. He even gains the power to send the boys on missions. But of course, this win for the character is immediately ripped out from under him once he realizes that Newman is the head popper. Everything the boys had worked for had all been a lie, making Hughie the biggest fool of them all for trusting Newman in the first place. This forces him back into following Butcher again while literally questioning his own masculinity for the entire season.
But I don't need you to save me.
Right, God forbid I help you because I always have to be the weak one.
Who approved this script?
If that wasn't bad enough, however, Season 4 somehow manages to completely embarrass and emasculate Hughie even further. For the majority of the season, he's off doing side quests to help his dad, or he's just going along with whatever the boys are doing to stop Homelander. But it's during this now infamous episode that Kripke decided to make Hughie the butt of a really, really bad joke. And just a heads up, we're going to be talking about some sensitive topics here. In an attempt to avoid monetization issues, I will be referring to the R word as assault. With that out of the way, let's get into this mess. So the boys want to sneak into this big political party Homelander's attending at Tech Knight's mansion. In order to infiltrate, Hughie is sent undercover as a Spider-Man parody. This plan ends up with Hughie being assaulted multiple times, almost to death, by the way. Now this already took things pretty far, even for the boys. But the worst part is how the show comes across in its tone. This entire sequence is played for gags, as if we're supposed to find this funny, and the trauma this would have on the character is never really acknowledged. The entire point of this is to emasculate Hughie and humiliate him for not only the entertainment of the villains, but the audience as well. It's a very fucked up writing choice, especially for a show that loves to sit on its high horse and mock those they see as immoral. It's clear that Kripke got so caught up with pushing the envelope and being as gross as possible that he lost sight of what he was actually doing to this character. But hey, on the other hand, it's not crazy to assume that Eric may actually just hate Hughie. Soon afterwards, Hughie is then assaulted by the shapeshifter who has captured Annie and stolen her identity. After this is discovered, Annie berates Hughie for being duped into being assaulted? Is that what's happening here? Alright, let's try to unpack this. So just to be clear, the shapeshifter was able to mimic Annie's appearance, memories, and personality. This is SA because Hughie didn't actually know who the shifter was and therefore wasn't able to willingly consent. And this is something he has to apologize for? Of all people, Annie should understand the importance of not blaming victims of assault. But I guess in her mind it's only bad when it happens to her? Or maybe just women? Is this how the writers think? Not to mention the fact that this is coming off the back of the Tech Knight situation and Hughie's own father dying just days previously. But yeah, you go ahead and yell at the guy for being tricked by a perfect imitation of you.
Girls get it done.
Anyway, he's able to shake all of this off and comes up with a plan to team up with Newman and to help take down Vought. Now this is yet another time where he takes over as leader of the boys. He gives a rousing speech, makes the plan, and seems to be calling the shots. Okay, so it looks like they're letting Hughie have his character arc by stepping out from Butcher's shadow, and no wait, he's immediately fucked over. So yet again, just as it looks like the dynamic is about to change, or one of these characters is about to grow as a person, it just gets slapped down. And this theme continues into season 5, where Hughie seems to be taking charge of MM and Frenchie, only to be reduced into being Butcher's whiny underling that complains about the idea of releasing the virus on the world. Sure, the writers give him the standard guilt trip subplots they typically do, but even then, there's nothing really to discover about Hughie. After 5 seasons, the main revelation we can glean from this character is that he keeps allowing people like Starlight and Butcher to walk all over him with zero repercussions. Any molecular fragments of his remaining spine were absolutely obliterated this season, and it's just sad to watch. The only time they sort of walk back this whole shapeshifter situation is when Hughie complains about Annie's treatment of him in an offhanded remark.
I mean, last year I got bad touched by a shapeshifter, and she still found a way to make it about her.
But this is only brought on by the weird negative mind spores that are in the air. And Starlight isn't even there to hear this complaint, so there's no payoff here. All the scene did was reveal that she's never apologized for her actions or how she treated him in the past. You know, if Hughie had done any of the things that she's done to him, I feel like the writers would be making a much bigger deal out of it. In the good old days, we'd call this kind of writing retarded, but now you gotta use proper terms like feminist. And again, despite being the main character, it turns out killing Butcher is the only thing Hughie does that has any actual impact on the narrative this season. Unfortunately, however, this act is undermined by how unnatural and forced it was. Plus, it had a boatload of plot holes, which we will be getting to in the Butcher portion of this essay. Like I said at the beginning of this chapter, the audience initially saw things from Hughie's perspective, but now he hardly has a presence in the narrative at all. Which is pretty sad, as it reveals how little the writers actually value Hughie as the former main protagonist. But if that wasn't enough on its own, the show gives a couple more kicks to his scrotum just in case he was feeling too good about himself. So in the epilogue, we see that Singer is now back in office, somehow, and offers Hughie his own team to help deal with the renegade soups that are now on the loose. Essentially his own version of the boys. Great, so finally, he will complete his character arc. Now that Butcher is out of the way and nobody is there to steal his thunder, and nope. He just owns his own shop and helps Annie stop crime.
What the fuck?
Talk about teasing the audience, Jesus Christ, can anyone have a goddamn character arc in this show? Hughie has just gone back to where he started. The video store thing just seemed like his current job. It wasn't his career. This guy's worked for the government. He could be a private contractor and help really make a difference off the front line, and this is what he chooses to do instead? Not to mention that he essentially does nothing while Starlight goes off to save the day single-handedly. Not even at the end could the writers allow this guy to assemble any form of dignity. He's just gotta let his toxic baby mama do everything for him while he gives up any chance of being his own man. But he's certainly not the only guy that gets put in his place this season. Chapter 7. Look how they massacred my boy. It may surprise people to know that Homelander wasn't always an incompetent and spineless loser. In fact, in Season 1, he's not only dangerous due to his physical strength, but also because he is cunning and perceptive as well. When the show begins, nobody really knows who the boys are at this point. And due to their status and celebrity, most of Vought and the Soups either underestimate the boys or flat out ignore them, allowing them to operate with anonymity. But when Translucent goes missing, Homelander is the one who becomes concerned enough to go looking for him. And he eventually puts everything together and figures out who Hughie is and why he wants revenge on A-Train. The biggest thing to take note of here is that he does this all himself. He sees Butcher and the boys as a threat when nobody else does, and he deals with it. It should also be noted that Season 1 does a great job of establishing him as a menacing presence. Every time this guy walks into a room, you really don't know what he'll do. Not only is every character on edge around him, but the audience is as well because he has the ability to kill anyone he wants with the blink of his eye. That's a pretty great setup for a main villain of any show, and it makes sense as to why he endures as a fan favorite. But it seems as though the writers have done all they can to tear down Homelander as a character. After every season, he just gets more stupid and less threatening. I mean, sure, he still kills people when the writers want to throw in some shock value, but after a while, it loses its edge. Especially when you realize that it's pretty unlikely to happen to the main characters. Like, how many times has Homelander been face to face with the boys at this point and never killed them? He has Hughie by the throat every season, but for one reason or another, he never gets around to just snapping his neck. Sometimes he just doesn't feel like killing them, or doesn't because there's some weird stalemate going on, or sometimes there isn't a reason at all. Like, why doesn't he just murder everyone after the fight with Soldier Boy in Season 3? I mean, they're all right here and they just try to kill him moments before this, and will continue to do so. It seems like he does this because of Ryan, but it still doesn't explain why Homelander doesn't have them all arrested. After all, they're in Vought Tower, and they just helped to commit an act of terrorism. This situation happens again at the beginning of Season 4, where the boys are working against him, but he doesn't do anything about it. Just because Ryan is here in this moment doesn't mean he can't fly to their hideout and execute them, as he attempts to do later by sending the Deep and Black Noir after them. Another argument that is made is that this is Homelander's ego that's at play here. He just doesn't see any of these people as a real threat because he's just so powerful. This argument, however, makes no sense with the full context of the story. As I have already pointed out, Homelander initially takes the boys very seriously and treats them like a real threat. And that's before they do anything to him personally. As the show continues, the boys only become more of a nuisance and they prove themselves to be his greatest enemy. By Season 5, they have actually come close to killing him a few times already. And now they have a virus that can not only take him down, but possibly every soup on the planet? So Homelander should be threatened now more than ever, which leaves no reason for him to spare the boys or blow them off as a non-issue. The only time the writers allow Homelander to lash out at the boys is when they are covered head to toe in plot armor. Notice how quickly Homelander lasers Butcher when he's pissed off here, but at any other point, he's reluctant to do so. Is this because the writers know that Butcher's on Temp V? Would that be the reason he does that here? And don't even get me started on Hughie being in that goddamn vent either. No, I don't care if Homelander can't see through zinc, something which air ducts are made out of. This guy still has super smell and hearing. He could have easily pinpointed where Hughie was crawling and killed him in an instant. But apparently shining this big ass light at his face is enough to blind him, making him somehow unable to track and kill Hughie afterwards. And since we're talking about blinding Homelander, we all know this guy has laser vision, right? Something that is obviously extremely bright, as it's, you know, a laser. This same situation happens again in Season 5, where Homelander is holding the boys hostage. He has them dead to rights when, bam, Starlight flashbangs him and they manage to escape. Even if we forgive the fact that Homelander is blinded here, he again can smell and hear extremely far away. All he would have to do is look in their general direction and it would kill them. It's not even like they go that far, they just run out the door. Oh look, he actually does this to Kimiko, the one person that can't die in this situation. This kind of thing happens again in episode 7, when O-Father captures Butcher and Hughie and offers to kill them for Homelander. But he just says, no, don't do it?
You want us to kill Butcher and Campbell?
No. Get Sage's location first. I owe her a visit.
They could get away.
No. I'm going to leave them alone and not actually witness them dying. I'm just going to assume it all went to plan. What?
These are the only people on the planet that are trying to stop him at this point. And there's no reason to think that they won't find another way to kill him, which is something they actually do in this very episode. And it's not like he's saving them for later so he can kill them himself, because Synapse is apparently ordered to take them out only a moment later. So what's with the initial holdup? Oh right, because then the show would be over and we wouldn't get this nice heart-to-heart moment with these two characters. At this point, the entire plot of the show relies on Homelander being too lazy or too stupid to kill the boys.
I have a gun in my room. You give me 5 seconds, I'll get it. I'll come back down here, boom, I'll blow their brains out.
He relies on Black Noir and the Deep to do his dirty work for him, even though they have both been shown to be incompetent and pretty much useless. Something Homelander himself constantly acknowledges. So the answer to this problem is simple. If you want something done, do it yourself. All this pussyfooting around makes Homelander a far less menacing villain because he's never allowed to do anything of real consequence to the main characters. Unless, of course, it's the second last episode of the show. And all of this reminds me of Vecna from Stranger Things. A villain who had every reason to kill the heroes and every opportunity, but chose not to for bad and unexplained reasons. All of which end up getting him killed in the end. Sound familiar? But hey, since we're pointing out how lame they made Homelander, let's talk about his powers and how they make no sense. A great example of this is when the boys are searching for V1 at Fort Harmony. While they are looking around, they become infected with the spore sickness that makes everyone angry. Due to this, the boys start arguing very loudly and get into a huge fight. Yet somehow Homelander doesn't detect them, which is pretty ridiculous considering how powerful his hearing is. We see multiple times that people need to watch what they say in Vought Tower in case he hears them. So there's no way that the boys could start talking to each other, let alone start throwing each other into walls without him knowing about it.
I heard you all. And I want you all to know that very soon, gentlemen, you are going to pay.
Another stupid thing about this whole sequence is that the boys try to mask their scent with deer piss so Homelander doesn't smell them. So the writers completely forgot about the other two senses that Homelander has that can detect people? This deer piss idea in of itself makes no sense anyway, as Homelander has been shown to smell things at extreme distances and even on the most minuscule of items. And of course, we are also being forced to forget that this guy has X-ray vision, something he should be using to find the V1 in this decrepit facility. This happens again in episode 7 when Homelander arrives at the boys' hideout to find Sister Sage. Before he gets there, Frenchie hides Kimiko and Sage in a vent, which is made out of zinc. This makes sense, but once again, the show completely forgets about his hearing and his super smell. Homelander is feet away from this vent and he somehow can't hear Kimiko's flesh being regrown, or Sage's fat fucking ass digesting her chicken burritos. Yet, all Frenchie has to do is tap on this wall here and he's over there in a second. Or what about when he's doing his national address? At the same time the boys are making their way through the White House. They get into shootouts, tackle people through walls, and Oh Father uses his super scream multiple times. Yet Homelander doesn't notice any of this?
Well, that's just lazy writing.
Can anybody see this script turning into sludge, just ready to be spoon-fed to an audience of leash guppies who don't think about what they consume? How is one supposed to sit here and immerse themselves into the story when stupid shit like this is happening? If you know anything about this character or what he can do, then you are punished for being interested because the writers go back on what they told you only an episode prior. But that brings us to Homelander's actual strength. So the show makes a great effort to keep telling us that this guy's the strongest being on the planet.
I'm the world's greatest superhero.
Now obviously Homelander is an evil version of Superman, and so in the audience's mind, we naturally think that he has a similar power level. He could destroy a city almost instantaneously and level countries in mere minutes.
I'll take out the nerve centers. The White House, the Pentagon, then any domestic defense capabilities, and then critical infrastructure.
And this image of the character is upheld for a large portion of the show, as the writers were initially smart enough to never give us a close-up as to what he could actually do. This idea is also carried over to how intimidating he is to other supes, as we are made to believe that nobody would be strong enough to stand against him. Well, that's until season 3, of course. Now these superhero fights are nothing spectacular. This is a television series after all, and Kripke himself would be quick to point out that The Boys doesn't have the budget to support a big spectacle like Marvel and DC can. However, the show does a lot in its writing to weaken Homelander to a point that his supposed power level becomes unbelievable, meaning that we don't need to see him knock down a building to demonstrate his ability, but he should be able to handle every other supe around him with ease. But that simply isn't the case. For example, we see that Butcher and Hughie are able to go toe-to-toe with him on Temp V. Yes, that is with the help of Soldier Boy, but it's still noteworthy that they're a threat to him at all. This gets worse in the season finale when we see that Maeve is quite a bit of trouble for him on her own and is even able to make him bleed.
Do you bleed?
And if Maeve is able to do this, then what was everyone so afraid of? If the original 7 got sick of Homelander, they could have teamed up and defeated him pretty easily. After all, this did happen to Soldier Boy, a guy who's only seemingly a little bit less powerful than Homelander himself. But if season 3 had shattered the idea that Homelander has no weaknesses and is far stronger than any other supe, Then Season 5 blends that idea into liquid and chucks it at the side of a moving car. So the writers actually had an opportunity here to fix these issues with the V1. This is something that Homelander is after for most of the season, and it is promised to make him stronger as well as immortal. But when he actually succeeds and becomes Giga Homelander, the writers still manage to take this golden opportunity and throw it in the trash. For example, in the final battle with Butcher, he is somehow weaker than he was before. Butcher is able to fight Homelander on his own, and comes out of it with barely a scratch. Yes, Ryan and Kimiko are there as support, but Butcher handles most of this fight on his own. And together the three are able to defeat him in a very short amount of time. For some reason, his lasers do nothing to Kimiko or Butcher, even though before the V1, they were extremely powerful and were able to cut Kimiko in half. And sure, she's got this radiation blast thing now, but that's only an ability. The show did not establish that this made her stronger or more durable in any way. We also see that Homelander's flying abilities are nerfed in this scene, as he is unable to escape the Oval Office because Ryan and Butcher are there to hold him back. When a few scenes previously, we see Homelander is able to fly Elon Musk into space and come back to Earth in a matter of 2 seconds. There is no way anybody here has the reflexes quick enough to catch this guy. And if your argument is, oh well, this Elon thing is just a gag, it's a satirical comment, it's not supposed to be taken seriously, then you can fuck right off. This happened, we saw it, it's canon. There is no reason why Homelander couldn't just fly out of here if he wanted to. And even if Butcher somehow managed to grab him, it shouldn't matter. Homelander could just fly Butcher into space as well, and why not? Well, because that would make sense, and we don't like that in The Boys, do we? You also have to love that after seasons of scheming and sneaking around, the boys just end up assaulting the White House and beat the shit out of Homelander on live television. If this was an option, why not do it sooner? Sure, they got Kimiko here to depower him, but realistically, with the help of Starlight and the Gen V squad, they could have taken him out no problem. Which makes me wonder why this was never discussed by the main characters. Starlight had contact with Marie and Butcher, and the whole V1 thing doesn't happen for a while, so why did they never just show up at Vought Tower in episode 2 and beat the shit out of him? In reality, Homelander is only as powerful or as weak as the writers need him to be in that particular scene. If the show needs him to be the strongest soup on the planet, he can dominate anyone in the room. But if they want to make things convenient for the plot to work, then they just nerf him even though it makes no sense whatsoever. Which gives this character about as much consistency as my alibi for the early morning of September 11th.
It's fucking unprofessional!
Which brings us to this embarrassing beatdown where Homelander cries and begs for his life before promptly being executed by Butcher.
Do anything. You want me to eat shit? I'll eat your fucking shit. You can't fucking do this. You can't fucking do this.
Now, does this feel right to any of you? Because when I watched it for the first time, I rolled my eyes and felt pretty grossed out by the whole thing. It just doesn't feel like the same character we have gotten to know over 5 seasons of this show. Now, of course, many people will try to defend this and will rely on the very on-the-nose foreshadowing.
I'm beating you. Take away these powers. And what are you, huh? Sniveling fucking loser.
Throwing tantrums when you didn't get what you want? Why the fuck would more power make you any better?
No. No, you ain't nothing.
In case you missed the point, Eric Kripke has been spoon-feeding the audience for a while now that Homelander is nothing without his powers. But based on everything we know about this character and his backstory, that simply isn't the case. We have seen Homelander at points of desperation before, as he nearly got killed twice in Season 3. Let's examine his reactions, shall we?
You can't do this. Stop! Don't do this.
So during his first fight with Soldier Boy, Homelander is beaten and forced to the ground. His powers and life are both nearly stripped away from him, but at no point does Homelander break. He only becomes more vicious, angry, and animalistic. Yes, after this fight, he begins to panic a bit about fighting Soldier Boy again because he's never been properly challenged before. This is the first fight he doesn't know he can win. But again, he doesn't think of giving up or begging for his life. The second time, the circumstances are identical. Homelander is being held back, unable to avoid his coming death as Soldier Boy prepares his chest blast. Yes, he does say, "You can't do this," but it's a quiet plea, a somber resignation. He had just come to understand that Soldier Boy is his father. And here, Homelander was hoping to be reunited with him. To finally have a family, the one thing he always wanted. He had even killed Black Noir just to win Soldier Boy's approval, who seemed to be the closest thing he ever had to a best friend. And yet, after all this, Soldier Boy still denies him. He forsakes their relationship. So Homelander isn't just pleading for his life, he's lamenting the loss of his family. He doesn't want his own father, the one man he looked up to his entire life, to disown him. And yet, even then, Homelander doesn't beg or grovel in such a pathetic way. Now, if you think the difference here is that Butcher is able to beat Homelander more viciously than before, and it's the pain that Homelander can't handle, then what do you call this?
You can't intervene.
If he can sit in a radiation cell and mock Butcher while he's in there, then he can withstand a few punches to the face. Homelander has also been tortured many times in his life.
Screaming in agony, and my tears just sizzled away.
So no, a few punches to the face shouldn't break this character. Really, Homelander should be more angry than ever, and should be doing everything in his power to kill Butcher as promised in Season 3. The fact that this doesn't happen is not only a disservice to Homelander, but is also a slap in the face to the audience as well. The boys had been building up this idea that the final showdown would be epic and bloody. This was going to be something bigger than we'd ever seen before, but it wasn't. The fight in the Oval Office didn't make any sense in terms of Homelander's powers. He is somehow weaker than he was before taking the V1, the editing is janky and all over the place, and the actual fight was far less compelling than Herogasm. So yes, this ending for the character is a disaster. But if we start sifting through the ruins of this script and try to understand the people who wrote this slop, it becomes easy to understand why we got the ending we did. After all, we all know which president Homelander is supposed to be an allegory for. And Kripke has never been shy about his hatred for the Orange Man, and has made it clear how much it impacts him and his writing team. Homelander specifically is changed by this, of course, and you can really see the transition of his character as the show became more obsessed with current American politics. And because Homelander represents the Orange Man, he's not allowed to have any positive qualities. He can't be tough, competent, smart, or cunning in any way, because that wouldn't fit with Kripke's political message. And not only that, but he also has to die in the most embarrassing way possible just to hammer home the idea that you're not even supposed to like this character.
I don't know how you root for Homelander. You know, when the guy is like slurping up breast milk and being like the weakest character in the show over and over and over again, and I don't know how you look at that guy and you're like, that's my guy.
The obsession with milk, the violence, the angel stuff, it's all supposed to turn the audience against this obvious allegory. But it never worked because no matter how hard they tried, Homelander was just too much damn fun. And this is mostly due to Anthony Starr, who does an amazing job in the role. So it's no wonder why so many fans say he's their favorite character. And this bothers Eric Kripke, because if you like Homelander, that means you might also like the Orange Man too, which destroys the satirical element the show is going for. And I don't think we need to pull out the magnifying glasses here to see that this death scene was just a weird, shameless fantasy fulfillment. This isn't Homelander, and it's not supposed to be. It's just what Eric Kripke thinks about at night while he lays at the foot of his wife's bed. So keep your politics in your pocket and put your characters before your messaging, not the other way around. But there you go. Homelander, once the greatest villain of his time, has now been reduced to a punchline of a really creepy joke. What a fucking waste. Chapter 8, Soldier Soy Boy. So like everyone else in this show, Soldier Boy gets his spine completely removed by the writers this season. His backstory, personality, and decision making is all designed to make him look weaker and less admirable. At the same time, however, Eric Kripke banks on this character to set up interest in their next spin-off series, turning Soldier Boy into a walking advertisement. Considering just how great this character was, it is yet another slap in the face to the fans of the series. His entire storyline this season is about his uneasy relationship with Homelander. Now these two are probably the most popular and generally well-liked characters in The Boys, so you would think it'd be pretty easy to create a compelling and interesting plotline about the rise and fall of their father-son dynamic. But as we've seen before, the writers like to squander every possible opportunity that is given to them, and this is no different, as Soldier Boy becomes the most inconsistent character in the show. One second he'll hate Homelander, and the next he'll kind of respect and be proud of him. So just for fun, Let's try to count how many times Soldier Boy flips back and forth like my manic bipolar ex-girlfriend.
No, don't do it!
In episode 2, he's brought out of cryo and reluctantly agrees to help capture Butcher in revenge for the events of season 3. He also seems to respect Homelander for taking over the United States.
Since when could Soups teabag the president?
So in season 5, the relationship starts off fairly positive. But soon after, Soldier Boy is infected by the virus and nearly dies, making him angry at Homelander for misinforming him about the dangers of the mission. However, soon after this, Firecracker and Soldier Boy become familiar, and she tells him how much Homelander looks up to him. This seems to soften his reservations a bit, and there seems to be a hint that he may actually want to connect with his son. But while searching for the V1 at Fort Harmony, he tricks Homelander and locks him in a radiation cell while he tries to find and destroy the V1. Despite this development, Homelander spares Soldier Boy and decides not to get revenge. Soldier Boy then feels indebted to him for this, changing his mind yet again and deciding to actually help him find the V1. Their relationship stays positive throughout episode 5, and it seems like the two have created some kind of bond as Soldier Boy chooses to save Homelander instead of betraying him. Everything is going well until Sage gives them a false lead, and tricks them into watching a video where Homelander is, getting it on with Stormfront.
I can explain. That was Clara.
So they have broken up yet again. But in that very same episode, he does a 180 again and gives up the V1 to Homelander because, well, that's what Claire would have wanted. But despite honoring his dead lover by making Homelander immortal, he still decides to reject him and retire to Colombia.
What I want is to get away. From what?
So over the course of the season, Soldier Boy jumps back and forth 7 different times on how he feels about his son, and in some cases, multiple times an episode. This is extremely frustrating because it strips away any natural development in their relationship. And with it, the audience loses interest because we're never on solid ground with the characters. Sure, Soldier Boy might disown Homelander here, but you know he's likely to completely change his mind in the next scene. What makes this even more pointless is that it doesn't go anywhere. He just seems to give up, and then Homelander chokes him out, and he's written out of the story. After all the bickering, moral debating, and relationship development, what was the point? Why did we spend all this time with these two characters if we were never going to get any closure? Homelander just gets killed off at the end of the show, and Soldier Boy's left in cryo until Vought Rising comes out?
I'm smiling, but I am very fucking furious.
Would it not have been more interesting to see Soldier Boy actually grow to love Homelander and then try to be there for him? The two could have bonded and even grown to see eye to eye with one another as he finally found a way to love his son and respect him. But as pressures mounted and the threat of the boys becomes even greater, Homelander would have fallen further into insanity. Soldier Boy could have tried to remain loyal, but in the end, Homelander takes things too far and kills too many people, forcing him to help Butcher kill his son. Not out of petty hatred over Stormfront, but because it was something he has to do to stop this madness. Needless to say, there was enough here to create a real compelling tragedy. But hey, pointing out wasted potential in this show is a bit like saying the sky is blue. It's just too fucking obvious. Not only is Soldier Boy inconsistent in his relationship with Homelander, but his character in general is all over the place. We are led to believe through a rather sloppy retcon that he not only knew Stormfront, but was in love with her and had been for decades.
You knew her for 5 minutes. I was with her for decades.
Yeah, I just said that. So let's tackle this idiotic notion that this supposed relationship makes any sense. The first time that we learned that these two characters had even met was a brief name drop during the Herogasm episode.
I founded it in 52. Me and this other soup, Liberty. Man, was she a firecracker.
That's it. That's the only time Soldier Boy references Stormfront in season 3. Now we can actually glean a lot of information off this one sentence. First of all, based on how little he talks about her, is telling in of itself. It suggests that their relationship was short-term, or maybe even just a fling. Not some decades-long romance that changed his entire perspective on life. Now one could argue that Soldier Boy is simply a reserved guy. However, we see that he's actually pretty open with both of these characters. He grieves over Crimson Countess to Hughie, as well as his feelings of being out of place in society. And he later has an emotional outpour to Butcher about his relationship with his father. So there's no reason why Soldier Boy wouldn't hint to a past romance with Stormfront. And hey, you might be thinking this is some small throwaway line, one that could easily be fixed or retconned. But hold on for a second, because I'm trying to build to a larger point here. So after Soldier Boy returns from captivity in Russia, he goes after his former teammates who had sold him out. Crimson Countess is the first person he goes after because she meant the most to him.
All those years that they burned me, I held on to the hope that you would come, that you would save me, because I still loved you.
Pretty odd that he would fantasize about Crimson Countess for decades when Stormfront meant so much to him. Considering that Soldier Boy was able to put things together, figuring out that Countess had betrayed him, you'd imagine that he'd be thinking more about Clara and how she could come to rescue him. Not only because she was more powerful, but she could also use her connections at Vought to get him out of Russia.
You know, I wanted some Rugrats of my own. With Countess. Ain't that a bitch?
So he was clearly in love with Countess and mourns the loss of their relationship, as well as the possibility of having a family together. No mention of anyone else, Crimson Countess is in full focus here. He ends this tangent by saying this.
Now I got nothing.
But with the context of Season 5, this doesn't make much sense, does it? First of all, would he be so heartbroken if he knew somewhere out there Stormfront was still kicking around? I mean, we know that she's dead at this point, but he has no idea that's the case. For all Soldier Boy knows, Clara is still waiting to be reunited with him, and yet he mentions her 0 times. Which is strange, as she is one of the few people on the planet that he would still have a real connection with. Not only because of their past romance, but also because she is one of a handful of people who is also immortal. Something that would keep them emotionally connected, obviously forever. Would it not be likely in this situation that Soldier Boy would ask Butcher and Hughie to find Stormfront for him? Or at the very least, check in on her in some way? But hey, this brings us around to the point, that this is a retcon, and a very poor one at that. When Season 3 was written, Kripke didn't know this relationship was going to be so fundamental to the overall story. And so its random insertion feels wrong because it had no build-up or foreshadowing. Not only is it clunky, but it also doesn't make much sense for Soldier Boy as a character either. From what we understand, this guy is essentially Captain America. He was made to be a propaganda hero for the Allies during World War II. His brother was also a war hero. And while Soldier Boy didn't fight himself, he still built his persona around the idea of being a defender against fascism. So it seems rather weird that he would fall in love with a Nazi at all, let alone be on board with her whole soup supremacist ideology. Sure, Soldier Boy isn't the best person in the world or anything, his morals are lax a lot of the time, and he certainly doesn't mind hurting people if they get in his way, but that's a far cry from agreeing, loving, and supporting fascism.
That's good for a late-night Harlem stroll, but this here, that's a certified crowd killer.
Odd terminology to use for a guy who is in love with a Nazi, that's all I'm saying. Well, I guess we're gonna have to find out how this all happened in Vought Rising, eh? Stay tuned for that. While on the topic of Soldier Boy's morality, let's talk about this cabal of tomfuckery. So in episode 7, Homelander and Soldier Boy visit Mr. Marathon, hoping to find a lead on the V1. While there, we are treated to a group of cameos of Seth Rogen and friends. Meanwhile, Mr. Marathon activates his trap card and uses this guy's bad breath to knock out Homelander, only to then beg Soldier Boy to kill him in hopes of everything going back to normal.
You know, we can go back to fucking and being fucking awesome.
Okay, hold on a second. This is real, right? Somebody wrote this. I'm not having some kind of nightmare seizure about an inverted reality, am I?
Nobody fucks my son but me.
What?
No? Okay. So what the fuck is happening here? Why would Mr. Marathon do this? First of all, he didn't know that Soldier Boy and Homelander were even gonna be here. So that means that this coup is completely improvised and had no forethought going into it. Therefore, they had no idea this breath attack would even work, and they're completely relying on Soldier Boy to get the job done for them. A guy they have just met. And not only that, but he is also Homelander's father. Yes, he and Soldier Boy have a rocky relationship, but Marathon doesn't know this. Ironically, it's so unstable that had he asked like a day or two earlier, it probably would have worked, but Soldier Boy is in his positive manic swing here. Just bad timing, I guess. So Mr. Marathon's plan, in its entirety, was to improv knock out Homelander, then beg his father to kill him in his sleep, and hope that nothing bad happens to them afterwards?
Not a great plan.
Vought and the US government would know exactly where Homelander is at all times. So if you kill him here, they will surely come after you. But I digress. So surprise, surprise, this plan doesn't work, and Soldier Boy decides not to murder his son for a total stranger. Then the shenanigans proceed. So despite obviously being fully capable of taking on Mr. Marathon in a fistfight, he uses Seth Rogen and his friends as human shields for Marathon to run into, killing them instantly.
I didn't mean to hurt those people. I'm not a bad guy.
No! No!
So obviously this entire sequence is just one big gag, right? We're supposed to laugh at Eric Kripke's friends being killed in ridiculous ways, while simultaneously being fan-baited by this supernatural reunion. However, this joke comes at the cost of Soulja Boy's character, because murdering innocent people has never been something he actively tries to do. The only time we've actually witnessed him murdering civilians is when his PTSD is triggered and his chest blast goes off. It is clear, however, that this isn't his decision. It's simply a side effect of the decades-long torture he suffered at the hands of the Russians. And yes, he was responsible for the death of MM's family, but even that situation isn't described as a deliberate attack, but more of a reckless use of his own strength. And I'm not absolving Soulja Boy here, mind you, but simply making a distinction between manslaughter and cold-blooded murder of innocent civilians. And as I've already pointed out, Soulja Boy kills people who get in his way and are actively trying to kill him in return. But even then, he spares them a lot of the time, as we see on 3 separate occasions where he chooses not to kill the boys when he has a chance to do so. The first time is when he has Hughie by the throat, and instead of snapping his neck, he just tosses him into a wall. Later on, he's quite literally beside Frenchie and Butcher at Fort Harmony, but apparently didn't even try to apprehend them because they drive away safe and sound afterwards. And he doesn't even acknowledge them during his fight with Bombsight, despite the fact that he could have vaporized most of the team in one shot here. All of these people are his enemies, who have tried to kill him multiple times already, yet he barely raises a finger to hurt them. But here he does cold-blooded murder, and he does this for no reason. Atomizing Craig Robinson doesn't help Soulja Boy in any way, as he doesn't take advantage of Mr. Marathon's stunned reaction. He just keeps running around the house doing the same gag over and over again. Despite the fact that these people have done nothing to him, were not involved in the attempt on Homelander's life, and are simply trying to escape. But I guess we can point and laugh because Seth Rogen got cut in half for no reason.
Well, I gotta admit that does sound funny.
Also, how does this even work? Mr. Marathon's powers are equivalent to A-Train's. He can pretty much freeze time with how fast he runs. That means everything happens in a blink of an eye, but from his perspective, everything just slows down. So unless this guy's running with his eyes closed, he shouldn't be making the mistake of running through his friends over and over again, as he could, just move around them. My point being that this whole sequence is absolute garbage that defies character arcs, their powers, the plot, and logic itself. And it's all done for some stupid tongue-in-cheek references. But hey, at least Soulja Boy proves his loyalty to Homelander. It's not like he'll go back on that in the very next episode or anything.
You don't deserve to live forever.
It's at the end of this little carnival ride of mind-numbing waste that we get another weird situation with this character.
Sir, whatever Soulja Boy told you, I can assure you that
You mean, your inner turmoil?
To give a bit of context, Soulja Boy and Firecracker have been hooking up. And during some post-coital pillow talk, Firecracker innocently questions her stance on religion in regards to Homelander's new Messiah complex. Soulja Boy then relays this information to Homelander, which he ultimately kills her for. So we don't actually see what he tells Homelander here, but whatever was said was enough to ruin her reputation. Now either A, he offhandedly made a comment that got blown out of proportion, or B, he deliberately ratted her out. I'm inclined to believe the former since he doesn't tell on Sage, even though she's clearly working against Homelander at this point, and he doesn't even trust her. But either way, it's extremely out of character for him to tell on anyone, whether on purpose or not. Even if the comment had no real intention, Soulja Boy should have been aware of how unstable Homelander is. And revealing any disloyalty could have been the result of her getting in trouble. Which, considering how much this character values loyalty and keeping his word, makes this all feel out of place. And the fact that Firecracker just disappears and he never even asks about her also feels strange. Sure, they weren't that emotionally attached or anything, but a random disappearance would surely raise an eyebrow. Even if there was a small scene where Soulja Boy asked what happened to Firecracker and Homelander lied about her resigning, that would at least be something, but she's just never brought up again by these characters. Which is a huge missed opportunity for this to be the wedge that breaks up Soulja Boy and Homelander in the next episode. Instead of this weird laptop sex video with Stormfront, Sage could have planted Firecracker's autopsy report for them to find. Then Soldier Boy would be confronted by the fact that Homelander murdered someone over the disbelief in his godhood, something that he doesn't even agree with.
And you're no god. No angel came to you. You had a wet dream about some chick with big juicy tits.
This way, their conflict would stay relevant to what's happening currently in the plot, and this would help to explore his character a bit more, discovering what he values beyond what Clara would have wanted.
Because of Clara. Because that's what she would have wanted.
Oh my god! Oh my god!
If this wasn't bad enough, Kripke retcons Soldier Boy yet again in order to make him more pathetic and weak. You see, it's not enough that he's an inconsistent simp who falls in love with a Nazi and has the emotional maturity of an 8-year-old. They also have to strip any notion that Soldier Boy is a tough guy at all. But to understand how Kripke does this in Season 5, we have to understand Soldier Boy's origin story. In Season 3, he has a heart-to-heart with Butcher where the two compare their abusive fathers.
He couldn't be bothered. He said I was a disappointment. Not good enough to carry his name.
So in the original story, Soldier Boy has been disowned by his father, and in order to prove himself, he joins Dr. Vought's Compound V trials. His idea being that if he became a celebrity, and quite literally the strongest man on the planet, he would then earn his father's respect. But this only disappointed him further.
He said I took a shortcut. That a real man wouldn't have cheated.
Now this is a great backstory, and it's reinforced by a very good fucking performance by Jensen Ackles. We can glean so much from this character through this short monologue, but the most important thing to note here is what motivated Soldier Boy to become a superhero. That being his desire to prove himself as a man to his father. This pressure was great enough that he was willing to pull strings with his father's friends and take an enormous risk to his own life in order to accomplish this. What this reveals to us is that Soldier Boy is indeed a brave person. And despite becoming the world's strongest man because of a drug, he still had the qualities necessary to earn that status because of the risks he took in order to achieve it. The tragedy being here that Soldier Boy earned the respect of everyone in the world except the one man who defined his self-worth. This also becomes very important to his character's overall theme in regards to his relationship with Homelander.
He said I was a disappointment.
You're a fucking disappointment.
The character dynamics, the cyclical nature of abusive fathers, the attempts to define one's own masculinity, it all works with this backstory. But according to Season 5, this scene, as good as it was, just didn't happen.
I read your classified file. Your brother won a Silver Star for bravery at Anzio, and that's what made you beg your father to buy you a spot in Dr. Vought's trials. Because it killed you to see your brother dripping in all that glory.
So instead of this heartfelt and sympathetic motivation, Soldier Boy does all of this out of pettiness. They even change it so he apparently begged his father to get him into the trials in the first place, turning this risk-taking renegade into a rich, spoiled daddy's boy who pisses himself in cowardly fear, completely undermining the entire point of this scene, which was Soldier Boy trying to prove himself to his authority figure.
You were so fucking petrified that they had to strap you to the table, and you pissed yourself.
And I'm not sure how the writers want the audience to take this. Like, are we supposed to believe that this entire scene with Butcher is a lie? Is that what the showrunners are saying? Or is Homelander just making all of this up to try to get a rise out of him? Because either way, this makes no sense. If it was Soldier Boy who lied about his backstory to Butcher, then I have to ask, why? Why would he lie here? This entire monologue is brought on naturally, and it's depicted as him being honest about a defining point in his life. Soldier Boy is feeling uneasy about killing his own son, and then he confesses a very genuine story about his relationship with his own father as a way to express his inner turmoil. When Homelander tells his version of the story, however, it would also seem that he's not lying because what purpose would that serve? Of course, Soldier Boy knows his own backstory, so even exaggerating the truth could be easily dismissed by him. But Homelander's retelling isn't even an exaggeration, it's a complete retcon. One that he got directly from classified files at Vought, leading the audience to believe that this is supposed to be some kind of unveiling of the truth. Which is further supported by the fact that Soldier Boy doesn't deny this, and later rants to Quinn about the same issue about being a war-dodging spoiled rich kid.
Yeah, I was just a rich, entitled asshole. Never seen a lick of real combat, huh?
Soldier Boy secretly being weak and pathetic doesn't make much sense given the context of his actions throughout the show. We see on multiple occasions that this guy is genuinely tough.
You wanna know what I do when I'm sad or scared? Fucking nothing. Because I'm not a fucking pussy.
He has not only been tortured by the Russians for decades, but he also dares to take on Homelander by himself despite being far weaker by comparison. And even after it's obvious that Soldier Boy is no match for him, he's never shaken by this. There isn't a moment where he freaks out about the odds of winning or questions his own abilities. Sure, he'll team up with people like Butcher in order to win, but it's also clear that he's totally willing to go it alone. As in Season 5, he threatens Homelander multiple times, with zero fear of the consequences. And even though Soldier Boy lies about his military service for his public image, it's not difficult to imagine that he would have actually fought in World War II given the chance. But due to government restrictions, he simply wasn't allowed to participate, and so Vought used him as a propaganda tool instead. However, we can see that Soldier Boy was more than willing to go to Nicaragua on a secret mission, proving himself in combat. All of this is to say that this guy doesn't fuck around, and he isn't one to get scared easily.
If you can act hysterical, I'm gonna slap you like I'm Connery.
Does he lie and boast about accomplishments that he didn't earn? Sure, but that doesn't mean he's the sniveling crybaby the show would like us to believe. So this is completely broken no matter how you look at it. What is made abundantly clear from all of this is that Kripke couldn't stand to let Soldier Boy have an ounce of dignity here. He saw the praise this character had been getting from the audience and decided to take him down a peg. Just because we dared to like a quote-unquote toxic male character. And so he tried to rewrite his origins to reflect that sentiment, hoping that we wouldn't notice. Unfortunately for Eric, I have nothing better to do than spend huge amounts of time thinking about terrible television shows.
Just the softest, wettest boy. You're pathetic. You're nothing at all.
Effectively in one scene, Kripke managed to completely undermine the entirety of Season 3. These revelations about Soldier Boy meant nothing, and the thematic cycle of fatherly rejection has been thoroughly ground into dust. In other words, Kripke is saying, fuck you for being invested in this relationship, fuck you for caring about this character, and fuck you for giving your time to this show. It's becoming more evident with every passing moment that Kripke not only doesn't care about how you feel about this story, but actively tries to punish you for your emotional investment. But when the writers aren't butchering this character and everything he stood for, the show is using him as a podium to set up Vought Rising. This is done by establishing relationships, lore, and questions that have pretty much zero payoff or explanation. Who is this Quinn guy and why did Soldier Boy hate him? How did he and Stormfront fall in love? Who is this bomb site guy and why did these two have a bad relationship as well? What is going to happen to Soldier Boy after Homelander's death? Well, I think you can guess at this point, but just in case, stick around for Vought Rising. This is frustrating for so many reasons, but the main one is, this character deserved a lot more. You don't need to shamelessly advertise his own television series in order to get people to watch it. Let the writing do the work for you. People have made successful spin-off shows about favorite characters in the past. But alas, I forgot who I'm talking to. The Amazon corporate vampires would slap logos on their children's coffins if it meant that they could get another dime to heat their swimming pools. So selling out the final season of their flagship television show is simply a drop in the bucket. Can't wait to see them perform yet another character assassination on Soldier Boy and Vought Rising. Yay! Ironically, the boys have just become like Marvel in this way. They want to make money off something they fundamentally despise, which is a compelling male character.
You know, TV is the character business, and ultimately people start to love those characters. You know, people connect and enjoy watching them, and at the end of the day, that's what we have to focus on.
Fuck you.
Chapter 9, The World's Tallest Dwarf. So we all knew this was coming, right? Sister Sage, the embodiment of what Eric Kripke imagines pure genius to be.
Einstein was a racist.
Racist?
Where do I even start with this anal thermometer disguised as a person?
Helping Homelander take control of the country is phase 1. It was only ever the beginning. Phase 2 is the end.
Yeah, that's as good of a place as any. Since her introduction, the show has been building up this idea that Sister Sage has been pulling the strings behind everything. And it wasn't until Season 5 that we were treated to what this whole plan of hers actually was.
After this soup-killing virus is released, after Soups realize humans are behind it, all hell will break loose. Soups butchering humans, virus butchering Soups. Oh, fucking World War Soup. And when it's all over, I can read all day, every day, no one bothering me.
Right.
Yes, the smartest person in the world wants to destroy human civilization so she can be left alone to read. You know, I can't tell if this is hell or I'm stuck in purgatory. So let's break down how this makes no sense in any meaning of the word. First of all, it's really easy to spend most of your time reading and not destroy the world, right? All she had to do was never accept Homelander's invitation to join the Seven, and bam! Back to reading she goes, because that's all she was doing anyway. And if that wasn't enough for some reason, then buy a plot of land out in the middle of nowhere and have Amazon deliver books to your house. We also have to acknowledge that Godolkin was originally going along with this, so that means the second smartest person in the universe was also in on this plan. But why? What kind of intelligent person would want to destroy all of mankind? Do they not enjoy infrastructure, new discoveries, scientific advancements, scenic views, nature, or fucking comfort? How long can you sit in a bunker before you get bored? Geniuses like to build things and make progress. They do not enjoy stagnation. What is the purpose of reading and learning new information if you don't utilize it? Sister Sage should have been a CEO of some mega corporation or led the fucking country. But nope. She was just sitting in her shithole apartment in Detroit where Kripke imagines geniuses would want to be, I guess. Amazing that the city hasn't returned to its former glory by now. Okay, so her endgame makes no sense, but let's try to dissect her execution. Or the lack of one.
Because I'll be watching from my cozy bunker outside Colorado Springs.
So from what we are told, this virus is powerful enough to spread worldwide within a couple of days. So how, pray tell, would releasing the virus start a world war? 2 days is certainly not enough time for Soups to organize any kind of attack on humanity, let alone start an ongoing conflict. And even if they could, what would that accomplish? Once the virus is out there, there's no stopping it. And who would the Soups even be attacking? The only people who knew about the virus and released it is Butcher's team, so no government faction is trying to take credit for this. What would most likely play out is countries around the world would be trying to stop the pandemic, officially making her an idiot because she was unaware of the deadliness of the disease and how quickly it spreads, making this whole plan nonsensical. Sage says it herself that Homelander is the one person that won't leave her alone.
Which is why Homelander can't survive. That needy asshole would never give me a moment's rest.
So why did she establish a power base for him and run his regime? Why not just kill him? In Gen V Season 2, Sage makes it out that Homelander is supposed to play some major role in Phase 2 of her plan, and forbids Godolkin from using his mind control powers on him.
If I'm strong enough to control one Odessa baby, that means I'm strong enough to control the other one.
Homelander.
But as seen in Season 5, it turns out that Homelander doesn't play a huge role in her plan. So why did she stop Godolkin from mind controlling him? Seems like that would have solved all of her problems right there. But even if we're able to forgive this plot hole, there are still many other ways where Sage could have killed Homelander. Surely she's smart enough to create her own version of the virus as well as a cure. She could have infected him and dosed herself with an antibody and the whole thing would be over. Or why not make a fake version of the V1 and have Homelander take it, which would make him lower his guard when the boys finally release the virus. And if that doesn't work, Sage still has access to Soldier Boy. She could have flipped on his PTSD music when Homelander was in the room and bam, he's vaporized. Hell, we see that there's a straight up manual on how to create Soldier Boy's chest blast, and she had Kimiko in prison for months, so Sage could have teamed up with her there and then, and began working on recreating the chest blast in secret. But if killing Homelander wasn't enough, and Sage was really set on destroying the world for some reason, then why not just use nukes? She effectively controls the government. The United States president works for her. Surely she could have figured out a way to get the launch codes. Then all she has to do is sit in her bunker and set the world on fire. Which brings us back to this war between Soups and humans.
Fucking World War Soup.
If this was always part of the plan, then why did she stop Homelander from killing all these people in episode 1? Homelander freaking out and starting a massacre would be the step towards a world war between these two groups. And you would think that Sage would have begun fermenting resistance, someone to help push back against the Soups in this coming war. But nope, she gets rid of all the Starlighters and seemingly does everything she can to keep Homelander in power, when pushing him closer to the edge would only help her cause in throwing the world into chaos. Why do I even bother? So instead of doing any of these far more reasonable ideas, Sister Sage completely relies on Soldier Boy to stop Homelander from getting the V1. A plan that seems totally improvised and evidently something that she was not able to control or even adapt to in case it went wrong. So initially, Sage is against Homelander waking up Soldier Boy and seems to discourage their bond.
For fuck's sake. Are you sure waking him was the right call?
This scene implies that Sage is still acting as Homelander's cold and logical right hand. But since we know that she is relying on Soldier Boy to stop him, then why is she not more happy when he wakes up? If anything, Sage should be encouraging Homelander to connect with his father so she can start manipulating their relationship. But even when this part of the plan gets going, she fucks it up multiple times. First, she not so subtly suggests that Soldier Boy should stop Homelander from getting the V1. But that quickly blows up in her face when the two become chummy after Fort Harmony. For some reason, Sage isn't able to read Soldier Boy well enough to discern where he stands with Homelander, and has Ashley read his mind for her, which makes no sense because this is something Sage has been shown to be quite capable of in the past. What if her main abilities is to be able to analyze people and know everything about them in seconds? For example, she knows MM so well that she can say the exact words necessary that would cause him to spiral into a panic attack.
Been watching my daughter?
I mean, she gets that from you. Chip off the whole block.
Shut the up.
But for some reason, she's unable to guess how Soldier Boy is feeling about Homelander, even when it's very obvious that he's becoming fond of him. She should be aware of this as he hasn't killed Homelander yet, and he continues to help him while deliberately keeping her in the dark.
Have you found the V1?
No,
Unless you're too busy helping Homelander find V1.
we're nowhere on the V1.
I mean, I'm not the smartest person in the world or anything, but I don't need a mind reader to figure this out. But anyway, this development makes her fall back to plan B. If Soldier Boy isn't going to hate Homelander on his own, then she will have to make it happen. And how does she do this? Well, she sends the two on a false lead to this house. Which brings us back to this amazing scene.
To make her happy.
Should I start with some basic questions that have no answers because it makes everything fall apart if you stop to think about it?
Give it a shot.
So what if they just didn't stop to open the laptop? What if Homelander looked at it first and didn't show Soldier Boy? What if Homelander's explanation about Stormfront actually worked and Soldier Boy didn't mind? How did Sage even obtain this video in the first place? How did she know the video even existed? Did she sneak into Homelander's apartment and look for this weird sex tape? Not to mention the fact that this entire scheme relies on Soldier Boy reacting in the exact way Sage wants him to. When only a few scenes ago, it was proven that Sage couldn't read his intentions or feelings.
But Soldier Boy is tricky. I need you to read his mind. What he knows, where they're headed next, and most importantly, if Soldier Boy is warming up to his sadistic rugrat.
We also have to acknowledge that if this plan doesn't work, which it has every reason not to, then Sister Sage is fucked. Because now Homelander knows she's against him and is trying to destroy the only relationship left that he cares about. But she isn't that stupid, right? Surely she could account for something like this.
Why do you hate me? I love her more.
I don't understand. He wasn't supposed to. It's impossible.
Oh, well, I guess she really went all in on this one. Dumbass. Were the writers high when they wrote this script? Actually, that's presuming a bit too much because that would mean they have the motor skills necessary in order to flick a lighter. Something tells me they get spoon-fed a lot, if you know what I mean.
Retard. You can't even say it.
Now, I have complained about this character's power set at length in my past reviews about The Boys and Gen V. And I always come back to the point that the writers never explain just how powerful she is. She is just as smart and as capable as the plot needs her to be, which is the laziest way to write a character, because the writers aren't holding themselves to any accountability. But now they have actually given us information that shatters everything, because apparently, Sage's plan didn't work because she can't calculate love. I guess geniuses can only think in cold, hard facts, right? They have no concept of the irrational nature of love.
So you do not understand love. So what?
But this isn't true, is it? Not only because there are multiple examples of Sage understanding complex emotions, such as her knowing that Bombsight would come to the V1 handoff in order to save Golden Geisha, because, you know, he loves her.
You thought Geisha's life was in danger, you brought the V1 to save her.
But it also says in her fucking bio that she's an expert empath. An empath is a highly sensitive person who doesn't just understand the emotions of others, but physically absorbs and experiences them as their own. Needless to say that Sage should have no fucking problem comprehending love. And if she couldn't do that, then she couldn't calculate eventualities or manipulate people in specific ways. So by making this flaw canon, everything we knew about this character and what she can do completely falls apart. She makes no sense. So after this master plan falls apart, Sage just hangs out with the boys and acts depressed for a while. Why isn't she retreating to this bunker she's been going on about for half a season? Surely it would be a lot safer than hiding with the most wanted people in the country. And why the fuck are the boys tolerating her presence here? The whole deal they made with Sage was that she would stop Homelander from getting the V1, but Soldier Boy ended up throwing a wrench in that plan.
Because of Clara. Because that's what she would have.
Yes, we heard you. Go back to sleep now. So Sage's plan didn't work, ergo, she has no use to the boys anymore. Which should mean that Butcher would be turning her into mulch at this point. After all, she did just fuck everything up for them, and that alone would be reason enough for someone like Butcher to get revenge. As we've seen, he's killed people before for way less than this.
But it don't change what you are.
That's not even accounting for the fact that Sage was directly responsible for Homelander's rise to power. And she has nearly killed all of the boys multiple times over the course of the show. Everyone here should want a piece of her. But nope, they just let her hang out and watch Love Island. They don't even try to force her to help them with Kimiko's chest blast. And it's Frenchie who has to give her a sappy monologue in order to get her assistance. You have her right there. She has nowhere else to go, and she's the smartest person in the world, supposedly. Chain her to the fucking radiator and get her to tell you all of Homelander's secrets and how to stop him. Why are you delivering room service to her? Jesus Christ, they even let her come to Frenchie's funeral. What a fucking disgrace. But anyway, so to test Kimiko's chest blast, Sage decides to antagonize her.
You wanted him to do it. I'm fucking stupid like you guys.
Now either this whole thing was a mistake and Sage didn't mean to get blasted, which I certainly wouldn't put past this character at this point, or she just wanted to get rid of her powers and unburden herself from her mighty intellect. Sorry, that was hard to say with a straight face. If you think this was all intentional, that means that she's still retarded, right? I mean, Homelander is still a massive threat at this point and could very well defeat the boys here. Keep in mind that they aren't aware that Soldier Boy is out of the picture, and that means the two strongest soups are still against them. So she would really need her intelligence to keep her alive in the likely scenario that Homelander and Vought come after her. She would need to know how to hide, cover her tracks, change her identity, and so on. And just because Homelander ends up getting taken out doesn't mean that she's safe either. Singer and whoever else took over the American government would likely be condemning and arresting anyone who was involved in Homelander's regime. They would want to make examples out of the people responsible and punish them for committing crimes against humanity. There would be a tribunal, and Sage would be the stand-in Hermann Goering for this whole thing. She was the architect for this disaster, and whether she has V in her blood or not would not matter. Sage would still be facing the wall. So by making herself an idiot, she is getting rid of the one thing that could possibly keep her alive at this point. After all, how could she defend herself in court or cut a deal with the government in this state? Without V, she seems to forget everything she knew before and promptly fucks off to Harry Potter world to be a sitting duck. Sure, she may not be super intelligent anymore, but is she also suicidal?
And you don't strike me as a suicide type.
It is very aggravating to see this Toad woman get off scot-free with no repercussions for her actions. As Homelander's right hand, she's responsible for numerous crimes. This includes destroying the Constitution, taking away freedoms and rights of US citizens, mass imprisonment and execution of civilians, planning assassinations, starting evil propaganda campaigns, crippling US allies, torturing prisoners, illegal experimentation, and so on. She is also responsible for the events of Gen V Season 2, which culminated in the mass death of innocent students. Ultimately, her grand plan was to destroy human civilization, which would have resulted in a devastating genocide. And to top it all off, she herself is a racist. The only secondary motivation she has for any of her actions is stated to be commanding white people.
All the rich white folks in the world hang on my every word.
Ironically, this is the kind of thing the showrunners claim to despise. But that's fine, I guess. We're just gonna let her get away with all of this. Sister Sage is the embodiment of everything wrong with modern Hollywood. She is brash, arrogant, and rude while simultaneously being the dumbest person in the room. The only way the writers can communicate her intelligence is by directly telling us that she's smart, but is utterly incapable of revealing this through her actions, as nothing she does makes any sense or seems to be of any consequence to the plot. Well, I've said what I've had to say about this wretch. I'm done. Please, Amazon, do not bring her back for yet another stupid spin-off show. You've burned enough money as it is. Chapter 10, How They Butchered Billy. So Butcher is yet another character we can add to the Book of Failures currently being written by Kripke, as he has been stripped down to his most basic character traits, turning Billy into a parody of himself. And despite what many believe, this walking disaster didn't start in Season 5. I'd argue the damage really began in Season 2 with the return of Becca, Or I guess in the last scene of season 1 if you want to get technical. Reviving this character was a bad idea, as Butcher's entire life's mission is getting revenge against Soups for taking away the love of his life. And Homelander initially being the main suspect for her death made Butcher's hatred of him very direct and personal. However, Becca's return muddied the waters a bit, and her death being caused by Ryan further eroded this personal vendetta. And sure, Homelander still assaulted her and started this whole chain of events, but Butcher's motivations became less about getting revenge and instead became more about protecting Ryan. Which is fine on its own, but the writers consistently push Ryan to the side throughout the show, and by the finale, their relationship doesn't really go anywhere. Instead of choosing one father figure over the other, Ryan ends up rejecting both of them.
I didn't choose you over him. I chose myself. I don't want a fresh start with you.
So this ending takes away from the previous investment the writers have put into this plot line. Now, returning Becca to the story could have been somewhat fixed had Homelander been the one to kill her in season 2, not Ryan. This would have refocused Butcher's quest for vengeance and would have given the audience yet another reason to hate the main villain. But as it is, the tension between these two has already been reduced into something less enticing. Now, I would say that Butcher's arc in season 3 was fairly interesting, and watching him become a Soup in order to kill Homelander was a solid step in the right direction for his character. However, this is all quickly undone in the finale, as Butcher makes a decision that in principle makes sense, but from a logical perspective, doesn't at all. Soldier Boy is about to kill Homelander, however, Ryan attempts to intervene and gets in the way. This causes Soldier Boy to yeet Ryan into a wall, and he attempts to kill both of them with his chest blast. Butcher then attacks him in an effort to save the kid. But did he really need to do this? I mean, from what we know about this chest blast, it seems to have varying effects depending who it's used on. For most Soups, it doesn't hurt them at all physically, but just ends up stripping them of their powers. We see this with Kimiko, Maeve, Bombsight, Sage, and later with Butcher, Homelander, and Ryan. So it's odd that Butcher wouldn't want to take away Ryan's abilities, considering that his greatest fear is that this kid will become the next Homelander. If anything, this seems like a perfect opportunity, not only to kill Homelander, but also to save Ryan from becoming a villain. Win-win. And if it's Ryan's safety he's really concerned about, then why not just pull Homelander away? It's pretty clear that these three have the physical strength to pin Homelander down, so why not just do that and then get Ryan outside the blast radius? I mean, Butcher doesn't even try to negotiate with Soldier Boy here, he just attacks him. But hey, let's just acknowledge this for what it is, a very notable moral decision, a line that this character is not willing to cross because of a promise he made to Becca. Please keep this in mind for later, it's gonna come up. And hey, if you think this is terrible character writing, then it's about to get a whole lot worse. In season 4, Billy Boy is suffering from cancer caused by the Temp V. In an effort to save himself, he tries taking regular Compound V, which only ends up giving his cancer superpowers. And in doing so, he also creates a split personality in the form of Joe Kessler, which resembles Butcher's darker and more bloodthirsty personality. Okay, show, you've gained a bit of my interest. Finally pushing this character over the edge, eh? And oh wait, he's just the same if not nicer.
If we do find that B1, and if it don't fuck us, you can have some for Annie and Kimiko.
Ha! Gay!
Great, so let me ask a question that plagues this entire series. What the fuck was the point of any of this? The entirety of his storyline in season 4 is dedicated to this transformation, and just when it seems like he's finally crossed the line and gone to the dark side, the writers pull him back and reset his entire character. Kessler never shows up to goad Billy or try to talk him out of saving Kimiko and Starlight. He actually never appears in Billy's mind again. Shouldn't he be more present now than ever? He accepted the cancer after all. There was a team up hinted in the season finale. And now it's the endgame. Things are supposed to be more desperate than they ever have been before, but Butcher seems no closer to taking that next step than he ever has been. So just like with Homelander, this show likes to jangle some empty promises in front of our faces and then never actually fulfills any of them. For example, it is established quite clearly in season 4 that Butcher will no longer be making deals with Soups, no matter the cost. He does this by murdering Newman even after she had agreed to fully cooperate with the boys and help to take down Homelander. By killing her, Butcher inadvertently allows for Homelander's rise to power as there is no one there to stop him politically. So we now understand the line that has been drawn with this character and how it defines Billy and his motivations. But of course, just a few episodes later, he's willing to make a deal with Sister Sage of all people? But why? Sage is offering almost an identical deal of taking down Homelander. And even after the deal falls through, Butcher just lets Sage hang out and mope around his hideout. This complete character change is never acknowledged, and we never find out why he goes back on everything that had been established in Season 4. Of course, the writers probably forgot about Newman themselves at this point and just wanted to move the plot forward, despite the fact that they have just officially broken this character. I guess he's only supposed to be evil Butcher when the writers want him to be, otherwise he's just a chill guy. Now, one could attempt to argue that Butcher's decision to commit Soup genocide is somehow fulfilling this character arc. But of course, this too comes with so many issues that it can't be taken seriously.
We need to end the whole bloody notion of Soups.
Throughout Season 5, we have seen that Butcher's softening up on superhumans and how he treats them. Sure, we get a bit of lip service of him wanting to spread the virus around the world, but in practice he shows to care for Starlight, Kimiko, and Ryan. So if anything, his arc is heading in the opposite direction here, and there really isn't any moment that makes him question all of this. There isn't another instance where Ryan gets out of control again, and Starlight and Kimiko never get in the way of his plans. So there's nothing to counterbalance these positive interactions, which would bring around his arc more naturally. After Butcher kills Homelander, Ryan rejects him and then his dog dies, and for some reason, this is what pushes him over the edge? But why? These two events have nothing to do with superhumans. The dog died because it was old, and Ryan just doesn't trust Butcher anymore. So there's no connection here for the audience to pick up on, which ends up making Grace's murder in Season 4 feel completely wasted. This should have been the final straw. The realization that someone even as good as Ryan could turn evil, and with that kind of power, he's a threat to the entire world. There should have been no going back from this, but the writers do it anyway because they hate committing to any real change. But then they also fail to recreate the narrative components necessary in order to make Butcher's final act feel believable. A skilled or even half-intelligent writer would realize that Butcher's last confrontation with Homelander would have been a great place to insert this nugget of revelation. In Homelander's final moments, he could have pointed out to Butcher that without his quest for vengeance, he has nothing left to live for. Homelander could have also revealed that killing him won't change anything, and that there will just be someone to take his place, another Soup to overcome. This would have given Butcher the confirmation that superhumans around the world need to die in order to save humanity. And by doing it this way, Homelander would have planted the seeds for Butcher's demise instead of it coming out of nowhere. This could have also been reinforced with his cancer returning after Kimiko took away his powers. With his own death being imminent, Billy could have seen this as his last chance to save the world. After all, it was really strange that this didn't happen in the first place, considering that the Compound V only enhanced his cancer, which was the only thing stopping him from dying. Without Compound V, Butcher should be right back to where he was in Season 4. So on top of everything, Kimiko's also the cure for cancer. And I'm very sure this will have zero implications to her personal importance to World Health Organizations. We'll just have to slide this all under the rug. Anyway, the character motivations here are just weak, and it makes Butcher's death feel fucking weightless. As though it was all done out of obligation to imitate the comics, despite it making no sense within the context of the show's plotline. So from a character standpoint, none of this makes any sense. But let's also give Butcher's plan here a logical overview, shall we?
I understand nothing.
Okay, so in Season 4, Butcher kidnaps Samir, cuts off his leg, and demands he make a virus strong enough to kill Homelander. However, Samir escapes before he can complete his work, leaving behind a weaker version of the virus for the boys to use. And in the finale, Butcher takes it with him to go on his not-so-murderous rampage. It is in this time gap between seasons that somehow Butcher manages to find Samir, and somehow also convinces him to finish his work on the virus. But, like, how? Butcher cut off this guy's fucking leg, locked him up for weeks, and tortured him. What kind of mental gymnastics did Samir need to pull off to even consider talking to him? And sure, at this point Samir thinks Homelander is responsible for killing Newman and Zoe, but that's only because Billy is the one to tell him that. Why the fuck would you believe this maniac? What reason would he have to tell you the truth? You witnessed him talking to multiple hallucinations. You know that he has a split personality disorder. Jesus Christ, I know this guy's a plot device, but does he really need to be devoid of any and all character? Anyway, it turns out that despite the virus being strong enough to kill Homelander, Butcher now needs Frenchie for some reason? Which doesn't make any sense considering that Samir says,
To make the virus strong enough to kill Homelander would evolve into something unstable, airborne, highly contagious, super lethal.
No one with compound V in their bloodstream would be safe.
A global fucking pandemic.
So if the virus is so deadly it can spread around the world in days, what could Frenchie really do to help here? And hilariously enough, it's never actually stated what he's supposed to be helping with, because obviously the writers don't know either.
You want Frenchie. You're still working on the virus, and you want his help.
And sure, Frenchie ends up becoming useful after Samir leaves once again, but it's not like Billy was planning on this happening. So it's just luck, I guess, that he preemptively broke Frenchie out of prison so he could help fill a role he previously wasn't needed for? And if Frenchie was really this important anyway, why didn't Butcher take him in the season 4 finale? He was right there. Or why did he wait until Frenchie was about to be executed before he broke him out of prison? I imagine that Billy Boy knew for a while that he needed Frenchie's help, so would it not have been better to break him out when Homelander wasn't expecting it and was trying to use him as bait? What this is in reality is a very contrived way of bringing our heroes together without actually having a reason to do so. That's all this is, and the writers literally have to break the back of the story in order to jam this all into place. Metaphorically speaking, this whole show is about as structurally sound as a skyscraper made out of twigs and cheap glue. But that brings us to the next big problem, which is this virus. Now we are told that this is a highly deadly and super contagious germ. Any soup that is nearby will pretty much die instantly. So how does it then jump from host to host? Contagious means that a disease can easily spread from one host to another, but this virus kills its host immediately. So if one soup gets infected, there's no time for it to spread to another unless they are in the same exact location. We are also told directly that humans are not carriers. And if it's strictly airborne, then why doesn't it spread after the first time it's used? As when Soldier Boy and Teen Team are infected, Vought simply quarantines the area with no problem. And so without carriers or hosts, and with the virus evidently not being nearly as airborne as initially thought, is it really that dangerous? Could it really go worldwide within a few days as Butcher claims it can? I mean, his plan at the end is to infect the sprinkler system and set it off during the work shift, which would kill all the soups in Vought Tower. And sure, that would perhaps take out dozens of superheroes, but what would happen afterwards? Vought would just seal up the building, and it wouldn't get any further than that. And then we have the whole setup for this send-off. After Butcher randomly decides to go on his suicide run, he heads to Vought Tower and breaks in by killing the only guard in the building, it seems.
It was super easy, barely an inconvenience.
What is it with these characters getting to heavily secure facilities without any problems? And it's here that Hughie is supposed to have his big hero moment and save Butcher from going down the dark path. First of all, it's so fucking lazy to have these characters not only be fully aware of their dynamic, but also directly give the audience the metaphor multiple times.
I think you want me to pull you back. Like Lenny used to. I have never once asked you to trust me. I am asking now. Like the way you used to trust Lenny. To be your canary. Or your Kessler. Or Lenny.
Yes, we get it. Hughie is just like Butcher's little brother, and he's the only person who can pull him back from the edge. Except he never does. There's not a single time where Hughie ever successfully talks him out of doing anything immoral. And in fact, all that happens is Butcher ignores him, and then does whatever he intended to anyway. Hughie fails to convince him to save the boys in Season 1, he doesn't talk Butcher out of teaming up with Soldier Boy in Season 3, and he fails to stop him from killing Newman in Season 4. Only to then constantly try and fail to convince Butcher not to use the virus throughout Season 5, which culminates in Hughie finally having to put him down. So no, Hughie has never been Butcher's way back to humanity like the show tries to tell us over and over again. At most, he's just a tag-along that gets ignored and constantly put in his place. And while the concept of this moral debate between sparing the soups and cleansing them to save humanity is interesting, it is absolutely pissed on by the fact that Hughie wins by stopping Butcher only to not do anything with this victory. Sure, he has a small superhero gig going on with Starlight, but that is clearly infinitely less helpful than whatever position Singer had offered him. So Hughie stops Butcher only to throw the world into greater peril, and then does nothing to help society get back on its feet. Like, the moral position of being anti-genocide is fine to have, no problem there, but Hughie hardly acknowledges what Butcher says here.
As long as there's Vought, there'll be soups, and sooner or later some cunt that's already out there becomes the next Homelander, and you fucking know it.
Which is absolutely true, and Hughie's personal ending should have been him picking up the mantle and continuing the fight against shitbag soups. revealing that Butcher had a point, but his methods had gone too far, that there is still a way of fighting evil while maintaining your moral compass. But I guess Bill Nye, the anti-soup guy, died for nothing, cause the world is fine now. There's nice music playing, Hughie is content in his life, and everyone seems great. I mean, the writers could have done anything to show that the fight is very much not over, and that there are still many dangers that lie ahead, but that just doesn't seem to be the case. But before I can close the book on this character and write him off as yet another inconsistent and disrespected mess, let's revisit that final fight with Homelander again, shall we? So in order to defeat him, Butcher and Ryan must team up and hold Homelander down so Kimiko can use her chest blast on him. Which is the exact same situation Season 3 had put these characters in, and we saw how Butcher reacted there. Remember I said to keep this in mind, right? This whole finale revealed that Billy holds Ryan's safety at a greater level of importance than his revenge against Homelander. But in the Season 5 finale, this event is not even acknowledged. Butcher is totally willing to let Ryan die. And I'm not saying that this relationship can't change or evolve in a way where he now thinks it's necessary to sacrifice Ryan, but it seems strange that there wouldn't even be an ounce of hesitation here. After all, this is something Butcher has been debating for seasons. And these are the same circumstances that stopped the show from ending back in Season 3, so the complete disregard for what's at stake here is baffling when you consider the character's motivations. But hey, fuck it, right? Who cares about any of this? Why get invested in any previously established character decisions or plot points? Just pack it up, shove it down deep, and forget about it. That is what Eric Kripke wants you to do because he's too creatively bankrupt to maintain any narrative consistency, let alone respect his own work. Ironically, Kimiko's comment here is the most accurate characterization one can find about Billy.
Because all you can say is oi oi oi, cunt cunt cunt.
Yes, he has become a meme, and they fucking know it. But the limits of our surprise were surpassed long ago, and now we have nothing left but abstract disdain. Before we get any deeper here, I'll take this opportunity to ask you to please hit that like and subscribe button. These videos are a lot of effort to make, and I'd like to spend more time on them and make this channel my full-time job. But to get there, I need you to help me grow. And I know that everyone asks you to do this, and it can get annoying after a while, but I'm a very small creator, and it really goes a long way. But now that I've done my begging, let's get back to it. Chapter 11, The Shallow. The Deep is a character who gets dragged through the mud a lot by both critics of the show and by the writers. He essentially just becomes a placement for whatever current male social issue they want to make fun of. But I think the much more pressing issue about this character is that he refuses to grow. In Season 1, the Deep uses his status in the Seven as a way to take advantage of Starlight, and he assaults her. Eventually, she confesses to this on live television, effectively ruining his reputation. Vought then sends him to Ohio to essentially be forgotten about. During his time there, he faces the consequences of his actions as humiliations begin to mount. He gets his dolphin boyfriend killed, he also gets this lobster killed, and he officially gets kicked out of the Seven. All this culminates with him being assaulted by a woman he brings back to his apartment, as she fetishizes his gills and touches them despite his protesting and clear discomfort. So now the tables have officially turned on the Deep here. He has experienced something akin to what he had done to Starlight, and so there seems to be a clear foundation being laid here to help him come to the realization that he was wrong to take advantage of women and to seek some form of redemption. The Deep could have also realized that status and fame are temporary, and trying to project such a shallow image of himself onto the world stage isn't a fulfilling lifestyle. This is made clear by just how quickly Vought pushes him to the side and forgets about him. So the natural next step for this character is to have him actually try to better himself by earning Annie's forgiveness and possibly turning against Vought at some point, as they facilitated the kind of culture that allowed the Deep to take advantage of these women in the first place. The Deep could have recognized these systemic issues at Vought and would want to stop these crimes from happening again. But instead of any of this, the Deep just goes right back to trying to become a star again. He ends up joining a cult and slowly tries to rebrand himself in order to get back into the Seven, ultimately just becoming Homelander's errand boy again, constantly embarrassing himself with this weird animal sex stuff. Essentially, any real development his character could have had gets absolutely crushed in Season 4.
I do not respect your truth. I do not honor and cherish your story, and I do not fucking apologize.
So despite becoming a victim of assault himself and going through multiple seasons of constantly being humbled, the Deep seems to ignore any kind of understanding he would naturally have with Starlight and just doubles down on being an evil dick. Fantastic writing here. Now his main plotline in season 4 is his declining relationship with his octopus girlfriend named Ambrosia, which is caused by his feelings of shame about being attracted to animals. This causes him to neglect her, and he ends up cheating with Sage. Ambrosia discovers this and calls him out for it, which starts a fight between the two, and the Deep ends up letting her suffocate. This acts like his final crossing over into the threshold of evil as he fully commits himself to Homelander's cause.
I will kill whoever you want me to kill, whenever you want me to kill them. I'll kill every goddamn fish in the ocean if you say so.
The problem with all of this is that it's played as a joke, which is actually how the show treats everything this character does. This brutal murder of his girlfriend is supposed to make us laugh because of the fact that she's an octopus. This is supported by the cheesy and over-the-top argument the two have, as well as how long it takes for Ambrosia to die. And all of this makes the audience question why we were spending so much time with this character. The implication is that this will all go somewhere. Either he will grow or change, or at least have some major impact on the plot. But that just never happens. In season 5, most of the Deep subplot revolves around him trying to stay in Homelander's good graces while competing with Black Noir. This rivalry eventually pushes Noir to destroy an oil pipeline that the Deep had endorsed. Apparently, this causes all sea life to unite against the Deep, and they officially ban him from entering any body of water again under penalty of death. So just to highlight how fucking crazy all this is, it is now officially canon that aquatic animals around the world can not only communicate with each other, but are somehow able to strategize against one man. Like there's some fucking ocean council that humanity is unaware of. Are there alliances between giant squids and hammerhead sharks? How do they speak to each other? Are there multiple languages, or do they all have some kind of telepathic dialect? How do ocean creatures get in touch with river or lake animals? And if fish are really this complicated, then surely that would mean that they don't all side against the Deep, right? There must be at least some factions of sea creatures that don't blame the Deep for what happened with the pipeline, or at least don't care enough to get involved. And were there no fish witnesses to Noir swimming down to the pipeline and destroying it? I mean, if the fish can somehow understand that the Deep represents the pipeline, then they surely can comprehend the idea of someone sabotaging it, right? But if aquatic animals can target certain individuals for specific crimes, then there should be a long list of people who are also banned from the ocean. I mean, the Deep is certainly not the first person to be involved with an oil spill. Did all the sea life come together and try to kill the CEO of BP after the Deepwater Horizon incident? Do they put out hits regularly on anyone that causes any kind of pollution? Wouldn't that mean that crabbers and fishermen around the world would be disappearing at massive rates? How is it even an industry at this point? If fish had the intelligence and capabilities shown, then humanity as a whole would be at war with the ocean at all times. So I guess we are just gonna have to ignore all this, right? Don't think, just consume product. Oh my god, is that Samuel L. Jackson voicing a shark? That's hilarious! I'm really glad the writers got to do this bit about sea life at the expense of the world's logic. And I can't believe I have to say this, but the Deep's relationship with sea life in general is poorly handled and lacks any kind of consistency. As previously mentioned, by season 5, he seems to have turned his back on ocean life altogether, as we can see him eating sushi and enjoying it. However, he gets so upset by the oil spill that he straight up murders Noir for it, but then is shown later to be polluting water with beer cans. It just doesn't really add up. And while this is all going on, the Deep is fired from the Seven by Homelander, which should be yet another turning point for this character. I mean, he has given up everything for Vought. He joined a cult, married a woman he didn't like in order to clean up his image, he murdered dozens of people, and turned his back on the ocean, but he is yet again pushed to the side at the most convenient opportunity. Despite all of this, however, the Deep is no closer to getting any revelation here.
I've always done whatever you've asked, no questions asked. I mean, I've given you everything.
Wishing you all the best.
And even after all this, he's given another opportunity to change his ways and become a better person when he sees this guy drowning. But of course, he refuses to grow yet again and predictably only embarrasses himself further. And what the fuck is this guy doing swimming anyway? Season 5 takes place in late winter and early spring. This water would be fucking freezing. Seems pretty convenient that this one guy decided to go drown right here, right now, but anyway. So even after being completely betrayed by Homelander, the Deep goes back to him and tries to beg him for another job.
The only reason that I haven't fucking killed you is that I want you to feel how truly worthless you really are.
Okay, so obviously this should be the breaking point, right? If being fired, losing his reputation, and then being ostracized from his community wasn't enough, then surely Homelander telling the Deep directly to his face how much he hates him would be the thing that finally pushes this guy over the edge. But nope, instead he just hangs around and sulks for a bit before the boys show up and kill Homelander. The Deep sees this as his last chance to prove himself for some reason and decides to fight Starlight. She then tackles him out the window and the two begin to battle on the beach. And why the fuck would Starlight land anywhere near the water? We, the audience, know that the Deep is banned from the ocean, but she doesn't fucking know this. Starlight should want to keep him as far away from the water as possible so he doesn't gain any advantage. Not to mention the fact that there isn't really any electricity around here for her to drain in order to utilize her main ability. It's almost like Starlight read the script or something and wanted to give the Deep this supposedly fitting end. But anyway, Starlight gives the Deep one last chance to finally own up to his mistakes and take responsibility for himself. And despite having literally no reason at this point to fight Starlight, he does so anyway. Apparently he blames her for all the bad things that have happened to him and wants to kill her.
But all the bad shit started when you showed up. I lost everything.
I mean, that makes pretty much zero sense considering he had fully recovered his public image, and the two barely interacted until season 4. So the writers are obviously bending over backwards here to stop the Deep from having any possible awakening. Also, he can be killed by Ambrosia's cousin or something.
Oh my god, oh shit, I'm so sorry.
And how the fuck do they even know he killed her? The two were alone when this happened, and it's clearly a secret the Deep wouldn't have shared with anyone. It also seems pretty unlikely that any sea animal would even be aware that they were together, since he found her alone in a tank at Herogasm, and even afterwards he kept her hidden in a closet. So I guess we just have to assume at this point that all sea life are part of some hive mind network where they can all communicate with each other telepathically. That is the only real explanation here that makes any sense. I also have to question just how quick this response time was for these sharks and this octopus to show up. Obviously the Deep has some kind of link to these creatures and can summon them at will. But obviously he's not going to call out to them here, so are they just patrolling the shoreline in case he shows up? Or did they somehow follow him from the White House? Also, how does the Deep not fight back here in any way? This guy still has superhuman strength and is obviously a skilled swimmer, so he should be very capable of handling an octopus and some sharks on his own. But I guess the writers wanted to get this scene over with, so he just dies immediately. So let's circle back around to the Deep's personal journey in this show. As I've been pointing out, the big issue when it comes to this character is his refusal to grow or change as a person. He starts off as a sniveling dumbass that can't own up to anything, and then he ends the show in the exact same way. And that's not to say that static characters are inherently bad. For example, Soldier Boy in Season 3 doesn't really have an arc. In the end, he refuses to accept Homelander as his son, and therefore doesn't allow himself to change and become an endearing father. He just repeats the same abusive behavior his own father had treated him with. Soldier Boy stays consistent throughout the season, and it's great because it made sense for his character. The Deep, on the other hand, keeps running into the same wall over and over again, giving him every reason to change, but he keeps refusing to, even when it defies all reason and logic. And this is all done as comic relief, or just to fulfill some kind of punishment fantasy on the character. Probably just to stick it to all those toxic dude bros the writers clearly despise. But once you realize that he's never going to have any payoff as a character, the pointlessness of all this sets in. This is topped off by the fact that the Deep doesn't do anything for the greater story for most of the show, especially in Season 5. Despite the Flight 37 video being released, much to Homelander's outrage, he still doesn't get mad at the Deep for retrieving the video in the first place.
I was humiliated!
So this is all his fault, and Homelander already hates him, so you would think that this would be the perfect excuse to finally kill the Deep. But it ends up not being mentioned at all. Go figure. The Deep then fails to kill A-Train or his family despite his clear desperation to do so. He betrays Black Noir and takes Stan Edgar to Homelander, but that doesn't really matter because Edgar had already been captured at that point. He then kills Noir, but the whole thing gets swept under the rug immediately and nobody cares about it. And the fight with Starlight in the finale doesn't even matter as he'd already been disowned by Homelander and the boys are able to get past the Deep with ease. So just like Starlight, you can best define the Deep by what he doesn't do. And this is very purposeful on Eric Kripke's part, as his intentions with this character are revealed in this quote. He was never going to have a redemption arc. I think his behavior in the pilot was really unforgivable ultimately, and then he just proceeds to do terrible things. Now, we very specifically gave him opportunities. We gave him opportunities all the time. Just make the right choices, dude. You honestly could go off and be happy if you just accepted your love for Ambrosia, for example.
Son of a bitch!
It's pretty ironic to discover that the Deep is somehow unforgivable for assaulting Starlight, but characters like Sage and A-Train get a pass for some reason, despite doing equally, if not more terrible things. As we've already gone over, Sage is the cause of Homelander's rise to power, and is therefore directly responsible for all the evil he does afterwards. Yet for some reason, that's all fine. And if we're talking about the pilot episode alone, then what about A-Train? In his opening scene, he straight up kills Robin, the girlfriend of the main character, something he ends up bragging about to one of his friends shortly after this. Yet A-Train is granted an entire redemption arc where he saves the heroes multiple times. So what am I missing here? What is the difference between these two characters and the Deep? Oh right, they're both Geminis. I get it. Now to bring my point around here, which is that this all goes against every standard of writing. I mean, the Deep actually might be the greatest example of what not to do when writing characters. And I think film schools around the world should have their students study the Deep in the hopes we never repeat something this disastrous again. What this is that Kripke thought he could string the audience along with a joke that never had a punchline. And that isn't funny, it's just pointless and annoying. So thank you, Eric, yet again, for enlightening us on what cerebral hemorrhaging looks like when it spills out onto paper. Chapter 12, The Forgettables. Now I'm sure we've all heard the term tightly written used in a way to describe a show or movie someone has watched. But what exactly does this mean, and why is it so important? In essence, to be tightly written means that a script is efficient and focused. Every line of dialogue, scene, character, interaction, and subplot serves a clear function in the overall story and helps to drive it forward. There aren't any spare parts or snags to get hung up on. This matters because it means that you, the audience, aren't having your time wasted by the piece of media you are watching. The Boys, however, is anything but tightly written. As I've proven already, there are about 1 million plot holes as well as pointless scenes and subplots. But not only that, there are in fact whole characters that serve no purpose in the story at all. So let's talk about them, shall we? Now, Black Noir 2 is someone who technically exists in this show, but barely has any presence on screen, doesn't really interact with any main characters, and has zero practical use in the plot. In the first episode, he fails to defeat Starlight despite having every reason to outmatch her. He then later captures Stan Edgar only to be betrayed by the Deep, and the two begin to butt heads over being in the spotlight. All of this pushes Noir to want to leave the Seven, especially when he's taken under the wing of a director and is offered a place on a Broadway show. Seemingly out of spite, the Deep then sends an eel to swim up the director's ass and kills him? Yep, I'm not making this up. This is a real show, everyone. In order to get revenge for this, Noir flies to Alaska and destroys the infamous pipeline that ends up killing a bunch of hive mind fish. Afterwards, Noir openly confesses this, and then allows the Deep to walk up behind him, strangle him, and then promptly stab him in the head with his own dagger. The Deep seems to be shaken by the murder of his former friend, and is clearly concerned about the repercussions from Homelander, but lucky for him, Homelander just doesn't care. He abolishes the Seven and then fires the Deep instead, something he was going to do regardless of what happened to Noir. So let me ask the obvious questions here. What is Noir's purpose in this show? What did he add? And what did this character do for the greater narrative? Noir gets a decent chunk of screen time this season, only for his entire subplot to go nowhere. I mean, it's pretty clear that this whole Broadway thing is only in the show as setup for this weird eel murder scene. Like, this is all just for a bit. We get this cheesy, over-the-top dream come true situation for Noir, only to have it ripped away from him in the grossest and most dramatic way possible. Isn't this funny, guys? Cause the eel went up his ass. This is funny, right? Then there's Noir's death, which makes no sense either. I know this character isn't the smartest person in the world or anything, but are you seriously gonna lower your guard to your most murderous rival? This guy is a literal backstabber. And why didn't you fly here, man? As soon as the Deep grabbed him, Noir should have flown out of the building. He could have dropped the Deep from high up in the atmosphere or just nosedived into a skyscraper. And the show yet again forgets that Noir has martial arts training and should be able to get out of holds like this. Or at least be able to stop the Deep from stabbing him in the head. And how does this even work? We see that Noir is bulletproof and can take multiple rounds point blank from a minigun. So how does this little knife pierce his skin? I guess we'll just have to throw this on the ever-growing pile of power inconsistencies in this show. And there's a pretty big missed opportunity to have Noir's narcolepsy come back into play here.
Oh shit! Sorry, you guys, I'm narcoleptic.
Because a lot of the issues with this scene would have been solved had Noir just fallen asleep during the middle of his victory speech, giving the Deep a chance to kill him without a struggle, and it would have paid off this established character weakness. It's pretty clear at this point that Noir 2 is only really there to give the Deep something to do for most of this season. The only impactful thing Noir does is destroying the oil pipeline, which ruins the Deep's relationship with all sea life. But as we have already established, the Deep himself is a pretty inconsequential character, so that's not really saying much, is it? Essentially, we just have one broken tow truck pulling another here, with nothing to gain from observing either of their personal journeys. And this makes the death of the first Noir even more disappointing. He was a character with a lot of potential that also got written out of the show. We got to learn about his tragic backstory, his feud with Soldier Boy, how he sees the world, and how terribly Vought had treated him. And for what? Just so he could be replaced by some narcoleptic dumbass who gets murder boners? Yay. Talk about trading in your Maserati for a fucking Pontiac. But hey, let's talk about Firecracker for a second. Now, her biggest contribution to this season is coming up with a promotional campaign for Homelander's new religion. But even that plotline doesn't get any real payoff in the end, as Homelander is killed before his religion can really take effect. Besides that, she ends up sleeping with Soldier Boy, but he doesn't really care about her and ends up not even noticing her death. So the only significance this relationship had was to her own character.
So you didn't nut.
And yeah, that's really it. A pattern emerges in Season 5 where the writers pull a bit of a Walking Dead and spend a weird amount of time with a character right before they kill them off, just to play on the audience's emotions. It's cheap, really, and it's a very telling strategy because it becomes clear that the writers don't have the skill required to make you care about these characters on their own. For example, in the One Shots episode, we see a bit more of what Firecracker's life is like, how isolated she is, and how there's a rivalry growing between her and O-Father. We also see her go through a crisis of faith when she's confronted by her reverend about doing the right thing.
Just cause Homelander tells you that the sky is red does not make it so.
But instead of this moment diverting or changing her character, she ends up staying the same as she was before. And then she gets killed by Homelander anyway for supposedly being unfaithful? Which brings us to O-Father. See what I did there? Because she's religious and loses faith and whatever. This guy's yet another empty suit who's just there to hang out in the background this season. But the most annoying aspect of this character is just how lazily they insert him into the story, as the writers do a very clunky job of trying to establish his relationship with the main characters. Such as his pre-existing friendship with Starlight that was mentioned 0 times before this, and the two never meet again after their first scene together. Then there's his beef with Firecracker, which is revealed and then dropped in the same episode. And his marriage to Ashley, which seems fairly positive yet surface level. And despite her betraying both him and Homelander in the finale, we never actually get to see his reaction to this because he ends up dying. Nor do we see how Ashley feels about getting O-Father killed. I mean, does she feel guilty about this? He was her husband after all. I guess it doesn't matter because this character didn't matter. He fails to kill Starlight, he captures Hughie and Butcher but then idiotically allows them to escape. And then he fails to even take out MM and Hughie in the finale. In essence, a rock that is sitting in the middle of a field off-screen has as much value to the plot of this show as these characters do. If you took Noir, Firecracker, O-Father, and even the Deep out of the show, nothing would have changed. So why have them in here at all? If all this was just to peddle some political talking points, then you could still have done that by giving these characters at least some relevancy. Sure, you can make shallow observations like guns are bad, fanatical religion is bad, dude bros are bad, but it's all surface level because the people representing the message are just cardboard cutouts. Things resonate more if the audience is invested in the characters and what they are doing. And that's why you'll see a trillion video essays on characters like the Joker, Silco, and Anton Chigurh. Because these are interesting villains and people want to know what their personal philosophies are and what they represent. Nobody is going to be doing a deep dive on O-Father because there's nothing to figure out. And just using these few examples, I've proven that this show is not tightly written. We are way beyond quality at this point, and in fact, it's just a distant sight in the rearview mirror, ready to be soaked up by dick jokes and monotony. Chapter 13, Mommy Milkers. Well, since we're on the topic of how to be an enormous waste of time, let's get this boring character out of the way. MM is initially depicted as the heart of the team. He was the moral center of the boys, the one guy who could stand up to Butcher when things were going too far. This was reinforced by the fact that he was the only family man in the group, so he had a lot more to lose than everyone else, which made him naturally reluctant to take stupid risks and go along with suicidal plans. This added a lot to the group dynamic and stopped everyone from just following along with whatever Butcher wanted to do. After season 3, however, it became clear that the writers didn't really know what they wanted to do with MM. In season 4, he ends up being the leader of the boys for about 2 seconds before ultimately just giving the role back to Butcher for no reason. In season 5, MM is supposed to be darker and more depressed after being separated from his family. Now on paper, this seems like a good idea. After all, this is supposed to be when the boys are at their lowest. So having the heart of the team give away to nihilism helps to reinforce this sentiment and establish a more desperate tone for the season. But of course, the problem here is that MM as a character doesn't really add anything to the story. Just like the Forgettables, this character makes no decisions that impact the plot. For example, in episode 2, he spares this crow chick, but this never comes up again. And this action pretty much flies right in the face of this whole edgelord I don't give a fuck about the world attitude. I guess he kills O-Father later on, however this also has a lot of problems which we're gonna get into in a second. Besides this, MM just hangs around and eventually seems to get over being depressed without any real explanation. Like there isn't a single event that makes him snap out of this or anything. He just gives a pep talk to Annie about nursing a seagull back to health and he's back to his old self again, even though nothing in his life has changed for the better.
Your mother's milk. You letting that sky rat suck on your titties or that dick? They were relentless.
I thought MM got his nickname because he was a medic in the military and his last name was Milk. So his war buddies called him Mother's Milk because he was kind of a parental healer, which makes way more sense than this weird convoluted story about a gay Finch. But anyway, the whole point is that MM isn't given a lot to do here. The writers even failed to pay off his feud with Soldier Boy, which was brought up multiple times in season 5. The whole reason he joined the boys in the first place was to get revenge on Soups because Soldier Boy killed his family when he was a child. He saw the danger of abusing that kind of power firsthand and didn't want anyone else to suffer the same fate that his family did. So when Soldier Boy returns in season 3, MM of course wants to take him down, but was always stopped from having a proper confrontation. The only time they really have a chance to face off is during the Herogasm episode. Of course, MM helps to bring down Soldier Boy in the finale, but obviously this plotline was left to be picked up later on. But instead, the writers just forgot about the whole thing, and we never get any closure on this relationship. Just like before, MM is given opportunities to take on Soldier Boy, but is stopped from doing so one way or another. Like he keeps squaring up to fight just before someone puts their hand on his shoulder telling him it's too dangerous. Which like yeah, no fucking shit. Soldier Boy is the second strongest soup on the planet. What is MM gonna do here? Is he gonna try and fist fight him or shoot him with a gun he's immune to? Either way, it just makes MM look like an idiot because he's made completely useless here and he would die immediately. But these two don't need to have some kind of physical battle in order to give the audience some payoff. A conversation between the two probably would have done the trick. For example, Soldier Boy could have confronted MM about why he clearly hates him so much. And MM could have told the whole story about how his family died. Then perhaps Soldier Boy could have revealed a big twist. Maybe the attack on the Milk family wasn't an accident after all. And in fact, it was Stan Edgar who had ordered Soldier Boy to do the hit on MM's father because his legal battles were becoming too big of a problem for Vought's public image. This reveal would have added a lot more layers to the story and could have also led MM to having a deeper revelation about his past. Afterwards, he could have turned his vengeance on Edgar, a man he would actually be able to kill, which isn't a huge jump anyway, as this was already something that was hinted to previously in the season and was also just forgotten about.
You're aiming to run Vought again, ain't you?
Like I said, we all have our part to play.
I have a part to play too, and that's to put a bullet in your fucking skull.
That's not true. That's a lie.
So let's switch to another pressing issue about this character. Now, Eric Kripke has stated that it was really important that MM never gain any superpowers in order to maintain a pure moral standard. But if that's the case, then how the fuck did MM shrug off a gunshot wound in episode 4? Like, we see the blood spatter and everything. He definitely got hit here. But despite this, the injury never comes up again. We don't see MM put a bandage on it, nobody stitches him up, and he never comments about having any pain afterwards. And we don't even get a scene with Hughie apologizing to MM. Like, I know they were essentially brainwashed here, but you would think someone like Hughie would be especially apologetic about shooting his friend? But whatever, he's just fine. Kinda weird since he doesn't have any superpowers, but let's not think about that. Which would be a lot easier if this wasn't the only instance of MM's amazing abilities. So during the White House assault, Father attempts to Fusro-da Hughie, but luckily, MM arrives just in time with that super strength ball gag and his head explodes. I mean, pretty unoriginal considering it's the same stupid gag Marvel pulled in Doctor Strange 2, but hey, far be it for me to call Eric Kripke a hack. So let's break this all down, shall we? It's established earlier in the season that Father can't use regular gags because his scream is so powerful that he launches them like cannonballs. In an effort to fix this kinky issue, Ashley gets him a super strong gag made out of titanium and Kevlar. So I guess the next time these two would have laid together, his fucking head would have exploded. And nobody even considered that. Would the scream not be blown out of his nose anyway? But that's besides the point. Which is that MM doesn't lock the gag here, he just puts it in Father's mouth. So there is nothing holding it in place here besides MM's physical strength. And since he isn't a superhero, that means this ball gag should have been launched into Hughie's face, fucking killing him. But it's official, his grip strength is more powerful than Father's sonic blasts. I would also like to add here that I think Laz Alonso's decision to slim down for the role really takes away from the physicality of the character. Besides being the heart of the team, MM is also the muscle, a brawler you do not want to fuck with. But after this sudden weight loss in season 4, he just loses this completely. And so with no personal subplots, no decisions that drive the story forward, topped off with stupid plot hole abilities, what are you left with? Well, you're left with a character that should have been killed off at least a couple seasons ago. But instead, MM just hangs around, and then suddenly becomes Ryan's adopted father at the end of the show? Which yeah, feels totally natural, and not forced at all. I mean, Butcher had that forgettable conversation with MM that one time, so I guess it's not entirely out of the blue. Still would have been nice to have some kind of development between these two characters. But since we're on the topic of everyone's favorite child actor, let's talk about Chapter 14, Saving Private Ryan. Okay, so I think we can all agree that everyone fucking hates kids in movies and television, because they're boring and usually don't act very well.
I'll try spinning, that's a good trick.
And Ryan is no different. He's simply a plot device the writers wheel out when they want to make Butcher question his own morality, or to show how Homelander struggles with being a parent. Ryan is entirely defined by his relationships with these two men and has no real goal besides pleasing them. And when he finally does say fuck it and goes off by himself, he doesn't really do anything besides sit in a remote hideout and sulk. If this kid is on screen, you can guess that he's either crying or is on the verge of crying with a light sprinkling of occasional rage.
I'm nothing like you, I fucking hate you! Leave us alone! No, just don't touch me, I hate you! I hate you.
It's obvious that Kripke was planning a downfall for Ryan, which is a character arc that is constantly stunted and repeated over and over again until it's finally abandoned in season 5. It's established at the beginning of his story that Ryan had a very sheltered life in this Vought compound along with his mother. Once Homelander shows up and ultimately stops the simulation, Ryan begins down a dark path, having emotional breakdowns that eventually lead to the death of his own mother. And while it's clear that this was accidental, it is still the first major sign we get from Ryan that he could end up like Homelander. In season 3, he seems like a well-minded kid and again is kept sheltered until Butcher hurts his feelings and Homelander returns to bring him into the fold. Ryan decides to accept Homelander and even ends up choosing him over Butcher as a father figure. Shortly after this, Homelander kills an innocent civilian right in front of Ryan, to which he gives a creepy smile. And this cliffhanger really implies that he's gone full Homelander at this point. This rigid violin music starts playing and it looks like things are only going to get worse from here. But in season 4, he turns back into a normal kid again and doesn't seem to like all the violence Soup's cause. This leads Butcher to try to win him over one more time, only to fail when Ryan accidentally kills Grace, another mother figure. Ryan is indifferent to this, which seems to be the final straw. As I said in the Butcher chapter, this has to be the point of no return, right? I mean, it seems like this kid has turned into some kind of serial killer, but nope, he just gets reset again. Ryan doesn't want to be like his dad after all. But where is this moral epiphany coming from? The only thing we really know about Ryan is that he's killed 2 parental figures and seems to get at least some pleasure out of enacting violence. So why establish this as his main personality trait if you're just gonna throw it out the window and factory reset the character? Where was all of this going if not to turn Ryan into the next Homelander?
I don't know. I don't know. I don't know.
So in season 5, it's revealed that he's been hiding in Russia. Some hit squad is sent to investigate the area, and apparently in order to maintain his cover, Ryan butchers the entire team. But I guess he apologizes about it, so he's not doing this because he likes it. Like the show is trying to play this off as though Ryan has no choice here. But is this really true? I mean, once he kills all these soldiers, he never comes back here anyway. After all, killing them would only create more evidence that you were living here. So why not just fly off to begin with and spare these guys instead of brutally murdering them? It really feels like the writers don't know what they're trying to say about Ryan here. Like this brutality seems to be building off the last season. Ryan is supposed to be darker now and he doesn't mind killing people. But then this all gets blown off once he teams up with Butcher and is willing to sacrifice himself in order to kill Homelander. Pretty noble all of a sudden. But then he just fucks off like he always does when the writers don't want to deal with him anymore. Back in the closet you go, buddy. Of course, in the end, Ryan shows up to help kill Homelander and then rejects Butcher before being adopted by MM. Would it not have been so much better if the writers had actually committed to this evil arc and had Ryan become Homelander's sadistic sidekick? The two could have become really close, but Homelander realizes that Ryan is the only person left who can really threaten him. This topped with Homelander's belief that in order to ascend, he needs to cut out the only humanity he has left, and therefore needs to sacrifice his son.
We gotta cut that part of you out like a cancer. You're never gonna be your true self until you transcend your humanity. What do I do?
This would tie nicely into the whole becoming God arc the show was going for, and it would have shown some real consequences to Homelander's insanity instead of just allowing Ryan to emotionally berate him. Having Homelander kill Ryan would have also helped to push Butcher over the edge a bit more. If Butcher realized that he had failed Becca and Ryan had turned evil and died anyway, it would have helped to justify his own downfall in the finale. Also, when did Ryan get together with Newman's daughter? These two have met one time at the beginning of season 4 and shared a fairly brief interaction. Sure, it seemed like they were sweet on each other, but when did they develop any kind of real relationship? Unless Ryan had been dating her off screen for the entirety of season 4, they could have only gotten together between these 2 seasons. Which means that Ryan somehow found Zoe and got her personal phone number when he was hiding all over the world. Meanwhile, Zoe has also been hiding in a super secure bunker that nobody knew about and is likely using some kind of burner phone. So how and when did these two meet up and have enough time to become girlfriend and boyfriend? Writers, please explain this narrative spaghetti, will you? Not only does this relationship make zero sense, but it's also completely forgotten about after this scene. Zoe ends up finding her dad and then goes back into hiding, and Ryan never seems to try and find her. So it's almost like this entire relationship was created just to facilitate a reason for Ryan and Butcher to have this meeting. And once it no longer served its purpose, the writers threw it in the trash. I'm sensing a theme with the writing strategy in this show. But anyway, enough about Ryan. I'm glad to have that little shit out of the way so we can move on and talk about someone more awesome.
Well, reports of my awesomeness have been greatly exaggerated.
Oh god. Please, no. Chapter 15, Jen Cringe. Well, look who it is. Black Jesus has finally risen from the dead, but not for long it seems. Honestly, where do I even start with this afterbirth of a character and her retinue of idiots? So Gen V is really bad, and just by watching the show for about 2 minutes, you know it's a waste of time. But it seems like Amazon has made it official. Wah wah wah. You see, Gen V was promised to have a larger part to play in the coming events of the boys' universe. Marie and company have been recruited by Starlight to fight Homelander's regime. And it's difficult to overstate how plain this was made by the season 2 finale.
We could use you.
For what?
You want to join the resistance?
You guys are fucking rebels now. Let's act like it.
The cliffhanger, the exciting music, the nod, and fucking wink to the audience tells us that this really matters. This will all be worth it.
Turned out not be so.
Well, it turns out we don't see the Gen V characters almost at all in The Boys Season 5, and even when they do appear, they're essentially useless. They give Starlight some information about Oldfather's location, which ends up going nowhere. and then they're told to fuck off to Canada, likely to never be seen again. Now don't get me wrong, I don't blame Amazon for canceling this travesty, but Kripke on the other hand can surely get a few fingers pointed his way.
Do you have any plans for a true crossover between The Boys and Gen V?
I like the idea that there's like strands and Easter eggs that kind of pop back and forth, but like full team up, no. I live in total fear of this notion that like you have to watch both of them to understand the other one.
We could use you.
For what?
You want to join the resistance?
You want to join the resistance? You want to join the resistance?
And so to me, it's like, if you want to watch The Boys, you don't want to watch this other show, don't watch it.
If The Boys and Gen V were never meant to merge, then why have all this build up for that very thing to happen? Why have this finale where we see Marie team up with Starlight? And why even have a shared universe at all, if all you're gonna do is have cameos of these characters in each other's shows? And it kind of just ends up pissing everyone off, because fans of Gen V are getting a bunch of obvious key jangling that has no payoff. And for most people who didn't watch Gen V, they don't want to waste their time on these characters to begin with. Why would they want the last few precious minutes of screen time they have with the boys be spent on a sappy goodbye scene between two characters they haven't even seen interact before? And from a narrative standpoint, it all ends up feeling weird and disjointed because it's very obvious that someone like Marie and Kate would be highly valuable to Starlight and Butcher. So their random absence here makes you question what the hell you're even watching. And just for the record, I actually don't want to see more of these characters. They got what they deserved, getting an embarrassing and underwhelming boot out the door. The problem here is that the world is being severely fucked with. Marie is quite literally stated to be just as powerful as Homelander. She should be a frontline fighter, especially when the boys attack the White House. She can tank laser beams, heal the wounded, disintegrate people with a thought, and can straight up resurrect her allies. The fact that Starlight just throws away her most powerful warrior is plain suicidal. It's amazing that Butcher even makes it to the Oval Office at all, but even then he only won because Ryan decides to rejoin the plot. Without that stroke of pure writing cringe, then the whole thing would be over. Homelander would have escaped or killed him and taken over the world. All because Michael Jackson here decided to tell Marie to leave for no reason. But alas, I think it's become quite apparent by now that Starlight is incapable of making good choices. Sure would have been nice to have Marie around when Frenchie died. Seems like a little bloodbending there would have come in quite handy. Yet another way in which Starlight has royally fucked this couple over. It's like she hates everyone around her. The writers also try to downplay Marie's power level here in the hopes that we will forget that this woman is practically a god and could fix the entire plotline single-handedly.
Or did you like the Chosen One and have Homelander level strength or some shit?
Well, reports of my awesomeness have been greatly exaggerated.
And what, pray tell, has been exaggerated here? Everything MM described here is quite literally the truth, and in fact still underplays just how powerful you are. Do I need to explain just how fucking valuable the ability to resurrect people is? And I love how this comment just shuffles things along. Like MM has heard that this woman could be their key to victory here, and she's like, yeah, I'm not that great. And he just takes that at face value? He doesn't protest Starlight sidelining Marie at any point. He just accepts it as it is. Which is even more strange, especially considering just how desperate the boys are since Homelander's taken the V1. Kimiko is burning herself alive with radiation as they speak, and they have a fucking blood magic sorcerer right here who can go toe-to-toe with Homelander. But yeah, fuck it. Real solid character work here, everyone. Sure is believable. But hey, I guess this is the kind of problem you face when you create a Mary Sue that is so powerful, her very presence takes away any stakes the writers could create. So what can you do but shove her off screen? Chapter 16. Oh Gustavo. If any characters seem like they're going to become a much larger player in the future of this show, it was Stan Edgar. From season 1, this guy was built up to be this mysterious Machiavellian puppet master that was behind everything. All Stan cares about is the bottom line, and is willing to do almost anything in order to make VOD a more profitable company. And while we're given bits and pieces of his backstory here and there, it is clear that Edgar has been around for a while and knows how to play the corporate political game. As even as a young man, he was able to successfully plot the demise of Soldier Boy, who at the time was the strongest superhero in the world. And even after that, he proves to be able to control Homelander for most of his life, and is one of the few people who genuinely isn't afraid of him. So after Homelander manages to actually kick Edgar out of Vought, it seemed like he would have some kind of backup plan. You know, pulling the strings from the shadows so he could get back into power. But instead of actively pushing the story forward, Edgar just becomes a waypoint for the main characters to use when they want to get to their next MacGuffin. I mean, he hides out in this bunker for a while and seems to be recruiting young Supes to his side, but it's not clear what he's doing this for exactly. And besides doing this, he doesn't seem to have much of a plan here. Would it not have been way better to actually have Edgar involved in Homelander's downfall? He could have teamed up with the boys more directly, giving them an alliance they desperately need, while also getting them to do his dirty work. And all the while, Stan could have been working to tear Vought down from the inside. And while the Black Noir reveal from the comics obviously wouldn't work here, Edgar still could have had a Supe loyal to him that was secretly stronger than Homelander. Really anything to show that he had some greater plan rather than just hanging out in a bunker with his granddaughter. But of course, we just get Edgar falling back into power accidentally. After Black Noir 2 captures him, he gets locked away in Vought Tower, and despite the pure hatred these two have for one another, Homelander doesn't torture or kill Edgar. And even if you're willing to brush that off because Homelander has some weird desire to impress Stan, then there's still the issue of Soldier Boy, who also seems to be fairly lenient as well, despite having clear homicidal rage towards everyone involved in his betrayal in Nicaragua. I mean, he killed Crimson Countess with zero hesitation, and he was in love with her. But here, now, faced with the man who had orchestrated his imprisonment, Soldier Boy doesn't do anything to get revenge.
I wanted to see the prick that sold me out to the Reds.
It wasn't personal. It was a business decision.
I mean, that's it? Pretty amazing, really, considering that there's nothing stopping him from snapping Edgar's neck. So after Homelander gets crowbarred in the nog, it's revealed that Edgar is put back in charge of Vought and is trying to clean up the fallout. Very curious how this ends up happening, since Vought should be a gutted carcass at this point. Singer would be making an example of anyone at the corporate level. Their company assets and property would be seized, and there would be a very thorough investigation into Vaught's role in Homelander's regime. Not to mention the fact that Compound V would be firmly in the hands of the government. So why the fuck would Stan want to take over Vought at this point? It would be a goddamn shit show. This is where copying the source material would have severely benefited the writing here, as Edgar's comic book counterpart was a much more interesting and methodical character, and was someone who ended up on top not because of luck, but because of his cunning plans. James Stillwell is the CEO of Vought America, and he foresees the coming problem with Supes and how they will ultimately get out of control, destroying Vaught's image. So he becomes heavily involved in Homelander's downfall and creates a scapegoat to blame all the damage on. And in the end, he creates a whole new product for the American government to use as a replacement for classic superheroes. The show could have played this out with Edgar creating a new pharmaceutical company, offering a perfected version of Temp V to the government, something he had actually seen as the solution to superheroes in Season 3. So instead of the company surviving for no reason and having everything go back to the way it was, Stan Edgar could have represented the danger of corporate capitalism. Sure, Vought may be gone, but that doesn't mean a new company won't take its place and offer you the same product in a different package. This would have reinforced the theme that true evil in this show isn't Supes at all, but corporate greed. After all, Vought is the real antagonist here, as it's the reason all of this ever happened. It was Vought that created Compound V to begin with, turning superheroes into celebrities and facilitating their terrible behavior. It was men like Edgar and Vogelbaum who created Homelander in the first place. So the ending should have been a reminder of what the real problem is here, which is the system that started this chain of events. The show kind of plays with this idea with Butcher's speech about Supes, but the consequences are reduced by the cheery end of the series. The world is getting back to normal, and despite previous promises from characters like MM, nobody seems to care about Vought coming back. The show simply fails to properly acknowledge this by essentially having all the heroes ignore the problem. As stated before, Hughie and the boys should have been gearing up to take on Vought again, revealing that the fight is in fact not over, that Homelander may be gone but the system still remains. Instead, the show just kind of goes through the motions of this plotline without putting any effort into it. We are told that Edgar is a genius mastermind, but evidently he's just a pompous idiot. He creates Homelander but then has no failsafe to get rid of him like he does in the comics, who he's then outsmarted by and is removed as CEO. Then he gets put in prison, only to then hide in a bunker for a few seasons before getting captured and imprisoned again. And the only reason he ends up on top is because the writers wanted him to be, all of which undermines the character and what he represents. Chapter 17, Why Some Women Shouldn't Talk. Don't worry, I haven't forgotten about Kimiko, but God knows I want to. So in the finale of season 4, Kimiko regains her ability to speak when Frenchie is captured by Kate. This moment is acknowledged as a desperate and heartbreaking scene, as the pain of losing the man she loves was so agonizing it overrode decades of trauma. It was real, and you would imagine the next time we witness her speak, it would be to reinforce the impact of this character arc. And it is needless to say that the significance of overcoming this kind of boundary should be taken seriously by the characters, the audience, and especially by the writers. Perhaps her first real words would be reserved for an intimate moment between her and Frenchie, or maybe used in a desperate situation as encouragement to pull the team together.
Oh, wow. Your skin is so oily, like hugging a McRib.
Is that a wastebasket?
Yeah, right there.
Thank you.
Holy hell! You couldn't even give us this, could you, Kripke? You had to turn the most endearing member of the cast into yet another foul-mouthed meme with a passion for dick jokes. I can't say it's entirely shocking that this is the direction they decide to go with, but it's nonetheless disappointing. What made Kimiko special was the fact that she couldn't speak. It made her stand out in a cast of quick-witted assholes. And when she finally did communicate, it was inherently more significant as it had to be clear and from the heart. And by throwing this away, the show suffers because the boys as a group has lost a vital part of their dynamic. But of course, the writers decided to keep Kimiko's least interesting quality, which is her relationship with Frenchie. I know, shocking that I don't care about this stupid romance, but it got pretty old after season 4 threw it in our faces when Frenchie ended up going on a gay side quest for no reason. What makes this all the more annoying is that their relationship is their only plotline in the show. Every season is just them being haunted by their past misdeeds, which is followed up by some petty drama between the two before finally reconciling their demons. It's also formulaic, and you'd think by season 5 they'd give us a break and have Kimiko and Frenchie just be together. But no, they gotta drag it out and continue this will they won't they dynamic as they try to figure out if they will work together long term.
Maybe we just don't like the same steak. You know?
Silence, wench!
It is yet another comparable problem with Stranger Things. Like, the world is literally ending, right? The fucking sky is falling down on top of you right now, and any day could be your last. So why the fuck are you panicking about your relationship status or what you want to do in the future? Realistically, these people should be living day by day, taking things as they go and trying to make the most of whatever time they have left together. But because they throw so much of their time away on petty problems, it makes Frenchie's death, and Kimiko's reaction to it, feel weightless. Too bad, eh? Only if she could have kissed him again, held him for a second longer, laughed together one more time. But instead, they had to argue over whether or not they were gonna have kids together, which obviously didn't end up happening anyway. You also have to love that Homelander, for some reason, just gave Frenchie a little poke in his tummy so he could have a nice intimate death scene with Kimiko. Considering just how fucking brutal this guy is, and his stated desire to skin the boys alive, should mean that Frenchie would be torn apart here. Yet another instance of the writers putting their desired outcome before what the characters would actually do. The last thing I want to bring up is just how stupid it is that Frenchie is able to recreate Soldier Boy's chest blast.
He weren't born with that power. The Ivans gave it to him through a consistent application of scientific methodology. Using the research we nicked from him a few donkeys back, me and Frenchie are doing the same thing to Kimiko.
Okay, so are you fucking joking right now? First of all, it was never established that the boys found a manual on how to make Soldier Boy's chest blast in Russia. They found the man himself, but are never shown to be taking any documents from the facility. So this is just a lazy retcon. And secondly, why would this manual be left lying around? This is super valuable information the Russians would want to keep well guarded. So no, this doesn't make any sense and it shouldn't be happening, but hey, we need to move the plot forward, so here we are. Chapter 18, White House Down. So in the finale, Homelander has achieved his goal of getting the V1, making him both immortal and immune to the virus. He is now ready to enact his final solution for the non-believers and cleanse the world of anyone who doesn't think he's truly a god. And so the boys formulate this genius plan of rocking him to the White House and just killing him. Gotta love that after all the mucking around with these super complex and silly plans, this is what they settle on. Before we get into the sequence, I just want to ask, what's Homelander's plan to get rid of all these non-believers? Sure, we see that he's gathered a bunch of psychics in order to read people's minds when he makes his big speech, but this is a relatively small room of people. And even if they replicated this 1,000 times over, it would still take forever. We have to assume that there are probably dozens of psychic soups out there, but even then, why would Homelander even trust their judgment anyway? Many of these guys are shown to be serial killers, so it's very likely that they're going to be lying about who believes and who doesn't. But why does it have to make sense, right? It's only the big evil plan that Homelander never gets to enact, so just don't think about it. Anyway, back to the White House fight. So despite preparation and having clear knowledge of where the boys will be coming from, the Secret Service still manages to fail to stop them from getting into the tunnels. Sure, they ambush them in the hallway with guns and a sonic emitter, but where's the special knockout gas? Or what about all the other soups? Homelander has every hero in the world at his disposal, and none of them are recalled to the White House to take out the boys? If he just had one psychic here, the whole thing would be over. And you just gotta love that there's no one on the other side of this door. Ashley comes to the rescue with zero problem. There's not even a single guard here making sure this door stays closed. Nothing. What's even more shocking is that reinforcements don't immediately show up as soon as they actually make it into the White House. This is one of the most secure places on the planet. Any frontal assault would be met with fierce resistance from both military and police personnel. There should be like 1 million well-armed fighters bursting through the door ready to take the boys down. And the fact that Homelander can have a fistfight in the Oval Office on live television with nobody coming to help him is also pretty shocking. Ryan, for some reason, is the sole person who shows up here. Like, was he the only superhero watching the broadcast? There are countless superhumans that want to keep Homelander alive and would want to gain his favor. So where are they? Why are they not here? The show has this constant problem of acknowledging the world and what's happening in it without it actually having an impact on the story. Homelander can make an offhanded comment about recalling all the soups to America, but that certainly doesn't come into play when it absolutely should.
Well, recall all the soup stationed overseas. American heroes should be protecting America.
I mean, for fuck's sake, it was on your promotional material. This superhero regime seems to be lacking the superheroes. And even barring all this retardation, we still have to deal with the fact that Homelander is murdered on live television, and everyone here just walks away like nothing happened. The legal and political fallout from this event is difficult to comprehend because it plainly doesn't make any sense. From what we understand, Homelander has essentially neutered the American government. He straight up murdered the president, and he dissolved Congress. Anyone who remained in power after his death would be a firm supporter of his regime. So you can't tell me that everything just went back to normal afterwards, and that the heroes are allowed to go on their merry way. This world is fucked, and anyone who took Homelander's place would have all the building blocks necessary to start their own dictatorship. And the only person who could possibly take over at this point is Ashley, since she is the vice president and the last surviving member of Homelander's council. Really, the show should have explained that she helped transition America back into a republic and helped to restore the old government because it was the right thing to do. That would be at least somewhat believable, but instead she's impeached right away. Who is impeaching her if Congress was dissolved? In any case, this is all a mess. And Starlight and Hughie just posting up in a video store at the end is way too ideal to make sense. Despite Homelander being gone, Starlight's public image is still destroyed, and many people around the world would still see her as a terrorist. Starlight and Hughie should be in witness protection or be living in some foreign country. There is no way this store isn't getting firebombed by some Homelander loyalist in the near future. The point is that this ending is messy and stupid. And the more you stop to think about it, the more it falls apart. Chapter 19, Your Mental Health Warning. You know, for a show that so desperately wants to talk about the big, difficult topics, they sure do a piss poor job of it, especially when it comes to the subject of mental health. Now, many of the characters in this show have some sort of mental illness or mental health issue. We got PTSD, mutism, retardation, split personality disorder, psychosis, depression, and even narcolepsy. And none of it has any payoff for the characters who are afflicted with these issues. Soldier Boy's PTSD is very prevalent in Season 3, and has a severe impact on both the plot and characters. Yet despite him never resolving his feelings about being tortured by the Russians, Soldier Boy just stops having PTSD, even though in his mind the time between seasons would have been instant. The last thing Soldier Boy remembers is fighting in Vought Tower, and then he's put on ice. Iced! So nothing for him has changed here. The same could be said about Homelander and Butcher's split personalities. Both these characters manifest different versions of themselves, which they are manipulated by. But in Season 5, we just don't see this. Homelander doesn't have any more chats in the mirror, and Kessler's plotline is essentially forgotten about besides that one random reference. But how and why these characters overcame their hallucinations is never addressed, leaving a huge hole in their development. Kimiko at least has some explanation as to why she gets over her mutism, but it's fucking butchered by this stupid TikTok humor. It would have felt much more earned and realistic if she only spoke occasionally and still primarily used her sign language. As in reality, this would have been a work in progress. Instead, she gets over her years of trauma off screen. Real great job of paying off the season's worth of development here, guys. Also, seems to lose and then regain his germophobia, which I guess is tied to his depression. So are the writers trying to say that his germophobia is a good thing? Like, this scene kind of says, hey, MM's back to his old self again. He's using hand sanitizer. Wow. Glad he's back to being paranoid about germs. And Black Noir's narcolepsy never comes back into play after the joke wore out in Season 4. So it's pretty evident that Kripke and his writers want to appear like they have the balls to talk about these big subjects, but when the tire hits the pavement, they utterly fail to take something as important as mental health seriously. And obviously I'm not saying you need a psychology degree to write about these problems, but at least make it function within the story instead of establishing key character traits only to forget about them a season later. I mean, honestly, do these people remember what they wrote? Chapter 20. That doesn't add up. Speaking of forgetful writers, let's talk about a few lines of dialogue that make no sense, which reveals that the showrunner pays zero attention to previously established canon.
You know, I spent my whole life going after Soldier Boy for what he did to my family.
Well, that's certainly untrue. Soldier Boy supposedly died back in the 1980s, and only found out he was alive a couple years ago. So there's no way has been going after him his whole life. And in fact, he's only been working with the boys for about a decade. This is established as Butcher is the one who recruited which had to be sometime after Becca went missing. Obviously, and Butcher would be aware of their shared history together, so it's strange that he would make such a false claim about his own life here.
Soldier Boy's flashy tip blast got me thinking. He weren't born with that power. The Ivans gave it to him through a consistent application of scientific methodology.
You're right, Butcher. Soldier Boy wasn't born with that power. In fact, he wasn't born with any powers, as he was one of the first test subjects for Compound V. Something you are well aware of since he told you his whole life story back in Season 3. Actually, no one except Homelander, Marie Moreau, and Ryan were born with abilities, which you should also be well aware of. Now, all of these little inconsistencies point to a general lack of care. The writers didn't even bother to watch their own television show before writing this crap, which is really lazy and embarrassing because it makes everything feel meaningless. It doesn't matter that they established something previously because it can all change in the blink of an eye. Chapter 21, The Stuff I Liked. I like it when Butcher calls Kimiko a dozy bin.
I ain't here for you, you dozy bin.
I do like my British dialect, I do. I thought the Flight 37 video being turned into some sexy dance on TikTok was a good commentary on social media. Wait, did I just compliment this show for its social commentary? I've been talking about the boys for so long I can't think about anything else. I close my eyes and all I can see is bad plastic surgery and dick jokes.
Crush my face and me!
The scene with Homelander and the Legend was actually pretty solid. It felt like one of the few moments where two characters just had a conversation that wasn't polluted by obnoxious humor. Overall, A-Train's ending was pretty good. His character arc may have actually been the only one that came full circle and had a fulfilling payoff. But it was still pretty stupid when the Deep straight up threatens to murder his family, and A-Train doesn't kill him on the spot. And it was weird to have him join and leave Starlight's rebellion off screen. But whatever, they did you all right in the end, A-Train. And what else? I guess I'm glad that Ashley got a bit of a character arc as well. I mean, it fucking took them ages to get there, but they finally had her join the good guys. But the literal manifestation of her consciousness was pretty weak and on the nose. And hey, what was with this person, this real they-them character? In Season 2, she's established to be the super dangerous and psychotic supervillain. And they keep bringing her back randomly as this big deal, but then they just kill her off. Felt like they're gonna do more with her character, but then just didn't. Oh right, I meant to be talking about stuff I liked. I liked the end credits, because then it was over. I enjoyed complaining about it, and that's about it. Chapter 22, The Real Colin Robinson. So now we have reached the part of the video essay where I talk about the writers and explain how this disaster came to be. But I think by now it's become quite obvious what's happened here. which is that Eric Kripke was given way too much creative control over this project. He was more concerned with sending a message rather than telling a story, which really comes out when he talks about Homelander. He really seems to dislike the character to the point where he's confused Homelander for the person he's satirizing.
Little period of time when he has no power and he just becomes like a blubbering, sniveling coward. It was just too delicious to pass up.
I actually really love that he became like a whimpering little baby when he lost all his powers.
Yeah,
I think that's pretty funny.
Yeah, do the oral, eat your poop.
Now, people will defend the boys by saying that the show was always political, which is true in a sense, but the focus turned away from critiquing corporate capitalism and became more about one man. Now, I'm not going to sit here and say that the current US president, or anyone for that matter, is above being satirized. But there is good satire and there is bad satire. And it's clear that The Boys is certainly the latter. I think Norm Macdonald said it best in this interview.
If you do an impression of someone, you have to like that person, you know, because you're playing the person and people like themselves. So you can't play someone and have contempt for them at the same time. You know, it doesn't work as an impression.
This political commentary, mixed with lazy writing, bad character work, and annoying dialogue, really gives the audience a bad taste in their mouth. I mean, what are we supposed to glean from all this? What message are we meant to take away from this show? I've pointed out pretty consistently that The Boys likes to take the moral high ground on various divisive social issues. But Eric Kripke himself demonstrates a real lack of understanding when it comes to basic human decency. And there's no better example of this than during this interview with Variety. When asked about Hughie's rape scene in season 4, Kripke had this to say: "Well, that's a dark way to look at it. We view it as hilarious. Obviously, Tech Knight is our version of Batman, and we wanted to really play around with that trope. Batman's fascist underpinnings as a really wealthy dude who hunts down poor people and then profits off their incarceration."
What you just said is one of the most insanely idiotic things I have ever heard. At no point in your rambling, incoherent response were you even close to anything that could be considered a rational thought.
If you think that male sexual assault is funny and can somehow conclude that Batman is a fascist, then I don't really care what you have to say about the current political landscape. In fact, I don't care about anything you think. And it turns out, I'm not the only one. At the end of the day, this show was running off the success of one good season, but what made it compelling in the first place was the characters. Sure, the world and story was fine, but it was the people that made it fun to watch. And by the time of season 4, Kripke had forgotten about what made these characters special to begin with. And yeah, it seems like the actors and people on set had a lot of fun making this. There's obviously a lot of love and talent that went into this show. But if you fuck up the writing, then the rest of the stuff doesn't really matter. Actors can only be as good as the scripts they read from. Just ask Hayden Christensen.
Liar!
In the end, it's pretty ironic to watch a show that went out of its way to mock superhero franchises like Marvel, only to become just like them. I mean, half of season 5 is just an advertisement for Vought Rising. But irony is wasted on the ironic. So there really isn't much else to say here. After about 3 hours, I think I've made my point. The Boys is not a good TV show, and we don't have to pretend it is anymore. Well, that is until Vought Rising comes out. And I'm sure this show will look like gold then. If you're still here, then I thank you for listening. I also want to thank Handsome Jack AI for supporting this video. And if you want to help me create more content like this, please subscribe to my channel. And like always, I'll see you at the next one.
You really just need one more take.
No, that's a wrap. Okay? Great!